The May 2nd, 2018 session of the City of Delaware Planning Commission to order. Could the clerk please read the roll?
Here.
Mr. Badger.
Here.
Mr. Halter.
Here.
Mr. Pearl.
Here.
Mr. Volnick.
Here.
Mayor Riggle.
Here.
Vice Chairman Mansoris.
Here.
Chairman Simpson.
Here. Item number 2, the approval of the motion summary of the Planning Commission meeting held on April 4th, 2018, as reported and transcribed. What is the wish of the commission this evening?
So moved.
Motion to approve by Mr. Halter.
Second.
Second by Mayor Riggle.
Mr. Badger.
Yes.
Mr. Halter.
Yes.
Mr. Pearl.
Yes.
Mr. Volnick.
Yes.
Mayor Riggle.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris.
Abstain.
Chairman Simpson.
Yes. Moving on to item number 3, regular business. Could the clerk please read item A, Willowbrook Apartments, into the record?
Item A, Willowbrook Apartments. Number 1, 2018-0026, a request revised by Medrock LLC for approval of a zoning text amendment to the existing Willowbrook Farm Tract PUD overlay zoning text plan unit development to allow a modification to the maximum dwelling units and density to multifamilies area 3 and 4 to allow additional dwelling units in area 3 and removing units in area 4, thereby decreasing the overall units currently allowed in total located on the east side of Houck Road on approximately 38 acres on property zoned R6, multifamily residential district with a PUD, planned unit development overlay. Case 2, 2018-0027. A request revised by Medrock LLC for approval of a combined preliminary and final development plan to multifamily Area 3 on the existing Willowbrook Farm Tract for a 180-unit apartment complex on approximately 15.506 acres, located on the northeast corner of Houck Road and DeGenova Way, on property zoned R6 PUD, multifamily residential district with a planned unit development overlay.
Thank you. Who will be our presenter this evening?
Mr. Chairman, I agree. Thank you all and citizens and applicant for being here tonight. This proposal has been remanded by City Council back to Planning Commission for further consideration at the applicant's request at the City Council's regular meeting of April 9th, 2018. The applicant has subsequently revised the proposal, both of the cases, one case being zoning and one case being a development plan from the previously submitted cases. You have the background information from all the prior cases, which includes elevations and floor plans and much detail in your packet, as well as the changes that have been brought forward. I think I'm going to go through a rather quick presentation, and then I think the applicant has quite a lot he would like to present, and then of course there should be an opportunity for public comment as well. So one of the changes is that this does have the multifamily area 3, the apartments, has a new name, the Flats on Houck. So you'll hear us refer to it that way as well. So we all know where the site is, the sites. For the zone change, multifamily areas 3 and 4, which are part of the overall Willowbrook planned unit development that was approved back in 1999. Here you see area 3 on the left of the screen, area 4 on the right of the screen, or area 3 abutting Houck Road and area 4 being behind the community center park. The subject of the final development plan, combined preliminary final development plan, is multifamily area 3, shown here. Our comprehensive plan has medium density multifamily for both of these pieces. That's the brown on the screen. Our zoning has multiple family zoning of R6 on both pieces, but the salient piece of this is that they're all covered by the planned unit development overlay of the Willowbrook Tract Farm development. This is a color rendering of the original proposed preliminary plan. I've changed directions on you. North is to the right of the screen. West is the top of the screen, and Houck Road envisioned at the time. You could see multifamily area 3 and 4 and future Boulder Drive, and actually you see a a parkland in between those as well. So we have that if we need to reference it. So what is allowed today? What is allowed by right today under the PUD zoning on both of these pieces is a maximum of 140 units on multiple family area 3 and a maximum of 155 units on area 4. That brings the two areas in total to 295 dwelling units. And there are a range of actual uses that can be put. You can read those for yourself, but multiple family units. So the revised proposal from the applicant is for 180 units on multi-area 3. That's an increase of 40 units over the by right today. And on area 4, no more than 90 units. So a decrease of 65 units from what is allowed today. Overall then, between the two sub areas, 270 total dwelling units between the two, which is a decrease between the two of 25 total units. So we have a series of exhibits to reference really should we need it, because I'm sure everybody in this room who cares about this case is very familiar with the land, but this is multiple family area 3. We have a close-up aerial should we need it that I think may become more helpful. We talked during the first cases about the proximity to the single-family homes. We talked about buffering between the two, et cetera, et cetera. So I provided this exhibit. In the presentation, the applicant has also provided their own aerial exhibit, which we have for reference as well, should we need that. I know this is difficult to read here. Hopefully you have a packet or you were able to look at it online and zoom in the PDF. Even with 90-inch TVs, it's a little difficult to read a grading plan from afar. But this is the revised grading plan that shows the mounding along Boulder Drive. Again, I've changed the direction on you. North is to the left on this exhibit. So it's just the way they come. I'm sorry, guys. It's the way the plans come. So north is to the left. So Boulder Drive, future Boulder Drive, and the bit that's constructed is on the left side of the screen. I do want to point out that there is in staff's estimation, there is a hole in the mound approximately across from where Harmony Drive is. My understanding in talking to the applicant and the engineers that there are ways to ensure that the mound meets the minimum 5-foot height and the minimum landscape required of 6-foot tall trees of planting. That's what we're recommending as staff, which is consistent with the first recommendation that we had. We believe as staff, we believe there are ways to engineer that. So the landscaping plan is shown here, the revised landscaping plan, which shows, I think, a more robust landscaping plan than the first proposal, particularly along the north property line. The one thing we would note again as staff is that the exhibit shows a linear line of trees. Our recommendation is for a staggered course of trees, and this is so that you really provide for not having holes in that line, and if you have trees that die or what have you, you just have, it's hard to explain the staggered course without drawing a diagram, but that's a normal course. And I think I think that was the intent. It's just the exhibit shows a linear line of trees. We'll certainly hear from the applicant later and he can confirm that or not. And then the other revised piece is a lighting plan piece. And diagram aside, I think the proposal is to have, help me, Lance, have lights that turn on and off automatically. Photocells, thank you. I wasn't coming up with that. Photocells on some of the lights, which lets them turn on and off automatically. So, getting old, what can I tell you? What's my name again? Fred. My name Fred. So this was the previously submitted color rendered plan for reference. You can actually see a little bit of the difference here in the landscape plan that we just looked at. This is the previously submitted architectural elevation. The other change the applicant is proposing is to have 4-sided architecture. And you have to look at all the architectural renderings, but that's the commitment from the applicant along those public-facing sides of the buildings as well. These are definitely very difficult to see on the screen. Again, hopefully you had an opportunity to review these. These are from before the elevation, and every elevation of every building and every floor plan of every building was submitted, at least with the last round. So I'm just going to click through these guys because they're here for reference more than anything. Again, the color rendering. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Staff does recommend approval of the proposal as revised by the applicant at this time. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
When was this originally approved, this property when it was originally zoned?
1999.
1999? And who was the original owner of it, or the?
Well,
Not the original owner, but who requested the zoning change?
I believe it was Medrock LLC, which is, the applicant is still the majority owner in,
Okay.
but it was,
But that was a whole area out there, is that correct?
yeah, it was 200 and some acres, almost, I think it was close to 300, 282 plus or minus acres.
Okay.
And it was zoned at that time A1, and so that the change was to the plan development.
Well, I went.
Okay.
In the packet, it has building 7 will shift south at least 4 feet. Can you point out which one is building 7?
Good point, Commissioner. Appreciate that. Oh, this will do. Building 7 is this one.
Just that one to the right or both those units?
Well, that's one building.
Okay, so that's all 7.
That one is 7.
Okay.
Correct? Yes.
Well, will that decrease the driveway? If you move the building,
Decrease the driveway?
okay.
Oh.
Originally, when the building was where it
Yeah.
originally was,
Right.
okay, and you had the parking lots there, and then you had building 6 across from it. When you move it 4 feet, does
Yeah.
that decrease?
We don't believe it will. It'll decrease the front yard in front of the building a little bit potentially, but I think the applicant can speak a little bit better to that. Again, it's at least 4 feet, so it's not 30 feet. It's, 4 to whatever they can get in there. But no, my understanding is it will not, your question was, will affect the drive. My understanding is it will not affect the drive.
Because I can't tell how much front
Understand.
yard there would have been there originally.
Understand. I think they can address that in their remarks.
Do we have any other questions for staff before we call the applicant
Oh,
up?
I'm sorry, Commissioners. The applicants provided some bound copies of a market study as well. I think this is a big document. He's going to summarize this in his remarks, but I'm just going to pass this around. I don't think there's 7, but you can, if you want to peruse it while they're going through their remarks.
Would the applicant like to come forward, please? Just state your name and your address for the record.
Obviously, the day before. And we turned that down.
Sorry. My name is Tamara Potts. My address is 44 Tinley Park Circle, Delaware, Ohio, 43015.
And my name is Jeff Lewis. I'm an attorney representing the applicant. My address is 1650 Lakeshore Drive, Columbus, Ohio, 43204. If I might, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a couple opening remarks. First of all, thank you for having us here and agreeing to entertain this application again. My client believes that he's made significant improvements, even though the city recommended approval of the plan as it was. We've asked that it come back here so that we can have an opportunity to address some of the legitimate concerns raised by some of the folks that are in the community. And my hair's a little off this morning or this afternoon. I had a hard hat on before I came here. I decided it wouldn't look too good to wear it in here, so I took it off. In any event, if you'll take a look at the history of this particular project, it was zoned under old 1169 of your code, which has since been repealed, interestingly enough, and kind of replaced by Chapter 1129. I'm not going to try and bore you with too much of legalities with respect to this thing, but I think it's important to understand the history of this and where it's come from and where it's going. I have the two ordinances that were originally approved by City Council 6-1 back in 1999. And the property was zoned planned unit development. And the thing is, Mr. Eflin will tell you, the great thing about a planned unit development zoning is that it can be amended with the times. It can be amended as market conditions change. As you saw on the one slide there was a whole litany of uses that could have been put in this particular piece of property. But when this property was zoned a PUD, the agreement was, and there was also a development a text that was approved by this council as well, or I'm sorry, by your then council, that said, hey, look, here's what you envision at this point in time. As market conditions change, as technology improves, as development is enhanced around the city, a planned unit development gives you the flexibility to change with the times. And as a matter of fact, I will also introduce this as an exhibit before I leave here this evening. I do have the final development plan that was adopted by your council in 1999. Now, the beautiful thing about property development and the rule of law is that once zonings are given, and I'm certainly not going to be here to try and give you legal advice. You have a very competent city attorney who has been very cordial and professional in dealing with me. I need to say that throughout this process. But what happens is once a property is rezoned, a property owner gets certain vested rights that can't be taken away from him. And as Mr. Eflin adroitly pointed out, at this point in time, my client can, without any further approval, put 140 units on the one site. And I think it was, is it 90 on the other one? I'm sorry, I missed 120, 100, okay, 155, excuse me. So the other thing about a planned unit development is it looks at a tract as a whole development, not just parcel by parcel. So it's important to note here that the overall density of this development is decreasing by a significant number. There are reasons why, and I'm not the expert in that. That's what I'll have people like Ms. Potts and Mr. Vogt and my client explain that in better detail. But interestingly enough, the development text, which was approved and has the operation of law by the ordinances and by your laws, specifically notes that the original tract numbers, the density numbers, are subject to change because PUD changes with the times. And everyone has kind of agreed, at least back in 1999, and again, I get back to these vested rights, that this is what's going to happen in the future. Now we're 20 years on almost, and my client, because of changes in times, changes in development, changes in strategy, financial conditions, et cetera, has decided that he would come back as, or it would come back, it's an LLC, as allowed by the development text to go through the statutory procedure to get the amendments approved. And that's what he's here to do tonight. Unfortunately, it appears no longer under 1169, although I'm not sure that it makes much of a difference. Old chapter 1169, you had much of it incorporated into chapter 1129. And what it does is it sets forth criteria, which is called basis for plan approval. And it's certain things that you need to, as a commission and council, needs to consider in order to make a decision, guideposts, to determine whether or not the application is well taken. What this does is this takes subjectivity out of the equation. This takes out, well, it's going to hurt my property value, or it's going to objections that you've all heard before. You've all been sitting here, and sometimes I'm sure you scratch your head, as I do many times. Some of the comments that are made are very legitimate comments. Some of the comments that are made, you scratch your head, you say, what's that got to do with the price of tea in China? But nonetheless, that's what we have here. There are certain, maybe 9 or 10 criterion, which you as a commission and the council will have to take a look at and determine whether or not the applicant has satisfied these criteria. Because if the applicant has, there's no logical reason to deny the application. Now, I know that you all have good confidence in your city staff and Mr. Effland, and I'm sure that Mr. Effland and his staff has spent hours poring over this application. And I don't want to speak for him, but it's my understanding that after taking a look at this and talking with the developer and looking at these criterion, which he is guided by and which his city staff is guided by, he has made the determination and staff has made the determination that the project as proposed meets these criteria. Because if it didn't, he couldn't come before this commission lawfully and say, we recommend that this be passed. So with that, that's just kind of a little bit of background as to again, I don't mean to give you legal advice, but Mr. Schulman and I have had many conversations over this project, and I think those are the guideposts that we have to keep in mind. And with that, I'm gonna, here's Ms. Potts, and I'm gonna ask her a couple questions, and if it's all right with the chairman, I'd like to ask the court reporter to swear Ms. Potts in.
I have no issue with it.
Thank you. Raise your right hand, look at her.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Could you please kind of, and this is, we're going to try and make this informal. And would you kind of explain your position with the company and what you were asked to do, what you're asked to do in general when determining whether or not to develop a particular site, and what you were asked specifically to do with respect to this site?
My name is Tammy Potts, as I indicated earlier. I'm the chief operating, I'm sorry, shouldn't have said back so far. Is that what you're saying, Carolyn? Mayor Regal. My name is Tammy Potts, and I'm the chief operating officer of TNR Properties, and I'm the president of its operations division. I hold an accounting degree and an MBA from Ohio State University, and I'm a CPA. An inactive status. It's required by law that I let you know that it's inactive. And I'm also on the board of the Central Ohio Apartment Association, have been for many years. I have been in the real estate industry, apartment industry, for over 30 years, and I've been involved in all facets, including accounting, finance, asset management, and operations. And so I was asked to give my opinion on what impact it has on the size of an apartment property.
Well, first of all, let me interrupt you. When you look at a project like this in general, what kind of consideration do you give to whether or not it makes sense to spend how many millions of dollars on something like this?
Well, you do a financial pro forma, and you put the estimated revenues and the estimated expenses, and then you do a calculation to see what the return on the investment is going to provide. And that's exactly what I did.
Okay, and in this situation, I'm sure that did you assay the needs of Delaware, City of Delaware, and the other projects and the demand?
Well, I did not personally, but I'm familiar with the demands of apartment housing in all the state of Ohio, and specifically in the city of Delaware. Yes.
Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. So I just wanted to explain a little bit about TNR Properties, since I am its chief operating officer. And I've worked with TNR Properties for almost 11 years. And TNR, over the years, has developed a very diverse real estate portfolio, from low-income housing to high-end luxury apartments. In its early years, it was focused more on affordable housing, and now we have transitioned into a developer of high-end luxury apartments. On TNR's, of TNR's luxury apartments, if you're not familiar with apartment ratings or how apartments are rated, they're rated on a scale from 1 to 5. In the apartment industry, a score of 3 is good. Okay, of our luxury apartments, our average is 4.6 out of 5. Additionally, for our luxury properties, there's a reputation score, and this reputation score is calculated by Reputation.com, and it's a proprietary algorithm, and it ranges from 0 to 1,000 points. And of our luxury properties, the score was 742, and which is almost best in class series, and the industry average is 577. So with the luxury properties that we develop, we do a very good job in the communities. The Flats on Haug is designed as a luxury apartment community, and it has to have a number of amenities because high-end renters demand such. The issue with when you do decide what amenities you're going to add or such, there's not only investment cost, but there's the ongoing maintenance cost and labor cost of retaining and maintaining those assets. Based on my experience in doing financial performance and analyses, not only for TNR properties, but from my former employers such as Equity Residential, there's a certain threshold of the size of a property that to be able to cover the cost, again, the investment costs and the ongoing recurring costs, to not only cover those costs, but also to provide an acceptable return to the investor. Additionally, payroll costs are one of the highest costs of an apartment community. And so they're more fixed than variable. And so when you have a cost that's more fixed than variable, when you reduce the size of an apartment community, the operating costs per unit go up significantly. I did look at online at all the apartment communities in the city of Delaware, and of all the ones in the city of Delaware, there was only there were less than 200. Hold on a minute. Of all the ones with less than 200 units, there was only one with a swimming pool. Only one apartment community in the city of Delaware with less than 200 units that had a swimming pool. And I am confident that the main reason for that, based upon my experience, is that the inability to cover the cost, the investment cost, and the maintenance cost for a smaller property. And that one property that does have the swimming pool with less than 200 units, it has far fewer amenities than what the Flats on Haug is prepared to provide. Doesn't even compare. However, the pool is just one consideration. You not only are we have many amenities to offer here, it will be the only HERS-rated apartment community in the city of Delaware, and that alone will cost thousands of dollars per unit. It is expected that the average cost per amenities for this property is $8,700 a unit, and that's significant. So we are very excited to bring the Showcase community to the city of Delaware. And we want it to be the best, just like because it's going to be in the best city in Ohio, which is the city of Delaware, and not because I live there, but I think it's a good city. If you don't mind, if you could hold questions if you don't mind, if you hold questions until everyone has presented, and then we can ask or take questions as a group. And with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Rob Vogt. Mr. Vogt is he's the author of that document that was being passed out. He's a principal of Vogt Strategic Insights. I personally have had the opportunity to be in several of his presentations on the apartment industry through my work with the Columbus Apartment Association. And I will say that he is an expert in the multifamily industry. Please welcome Mr. Vogt.
Excuse me. This was given to us tonight.
Yeah, he's going to summarize it.
We haven't had time to look at this. I mean, how long will it take him to explain this whole thing to us?
Oh, I'll be brief.
I know you'll be brief, but this is.
I think you'll find a lot of it's just supporting data and
30-some pages long, and I'm supposed to understand this? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not. We've had this happen before where people come in and just dump stuff on us.
Mr. Vogt, if you could please give your name and your address for the record.
Sure. My name is Robert Vogt. I live at 775 Park Street, Columbus, 43215.
And court order, please swear the witness.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
Mr. Vogt, could you please give a brief summary of your background and tell the council kind of what you do for a living and
Sure.
the kinds of things, experience that you've had in doing it?
Sure. As mentioned, I am a partner with the real estate market research firm of Bose Strategic Insights. We conduct site-specific market feasibility studies for a wide variety of residential real estate, not only here in Central Ohio, but across the country. We have 35 employees. We conduct market studies for things such as affordable apartments, which is, and I'll explain why you have that field survey in front of you, market rate apartment projects, senior housing, assisted living, congregate care, single family condominiums. So we do a wide variety of market studies. I have been involved in real estate market studies since I graduated from Ohio State for the past, I'm afraid to admit, 38 years. And that's the only business that I've been involved with. So I have seen a lot of markets. Our firm, which has, as I said, 35 employees, we do about 600 market studies a year. So we end up seeing a lot of projects across the country. And so we have a lot of experience being able to take a look at projects and determine if they are in fact market feasible.
And could you tell the commission some of your clients that they might be familiar with in Central Ohio?
Schottenstein Development is certainly one of the folks that developed the Grand Central project in Powell. Kaufman Development, Soloff Development, Casto has been a client. I think just about every major apartment developer in Central Ohio has been a client of ours at some point in the past.
And typically, when one of those clients calls you in to take a look at something, what is it that they ask you to do in layman's terms?
Well, generally, they call us in when the lender wants to know if there's a market. But basically, they generally present a concept to us, generally the number of units, the type of units, the amenities that are proposed, the rent levels. And we go out and assemble a market study that establishes that. We want to establish whether or not a project is going to achieve a stabilized occupancy and if the rates are in fact reasonable. So we go through this entire process of a market study. And I should clarify, what you have in front of you is not a market study. I wanted to provide some background on the status of the multifamily market in Delaware. We were fortunate enough that we had prepared a market study in February for an affordable housing project that was submitted to OFA for 9% allocation. So we had that field survey from February. It's dated February. The intent of it was to give you a sense of what the multifamily market was in Delaware.
And what did your studies with respect to the city of Delaware determine as to the demand for multifamily residential development?
And Jeff, I should clarify, it's a bit of an art form, I think, to do market studies and trying to establish the demand for housing. There's kind of two terminologies that we use. One is, what is the need for housing? And that is, how many new households do we have? And how many new housing units do we have to have for those folks? The other side of housing demand is basically the desire to live someplace. And we see a lot of folks that want to improve their housing situation, and we'll look at a variety of housing options. And because there isn't a specific new household and a new housing unit, there's still a demand for new housing. So what we looked at in Delaware was that we found a market where the demand for housing exceeds the supply. And what I mean by that is that we have a lot more need for housing than we're able to provide to them, at least on the multifamily side, on the rental side. We found, you'll see in the summary that I prepared for this, a occupancy rate of nearly 98%. That means only 2 out of every 100 units in the city are vacant. It's important to realize that a market needs to have an adequate supply so that you give folks housing choices. And if you don't give them housing choices, they're going to move out of that, move to the area, or move into something else. So anyway, that's what you have in front of you, is a summary of modern apartments in the city of Delaware. and the occupancy rate of those properties.
And what were you asked to do in this case specifically with respect to this project?
Well, what I was interested in to see how the project stacked up with the remainder of the rental market in Delaware. I was specifically interested to take a look at the number of income qualified renters who could support the rents that were being proposed on this site. And so we go through a calculation process of how many folks, how many renter households could actually afford the rents that are proposed on this site. You'll see in that letter that there's a calculation for that. And we have found that what we call the capture rate, the number of renter qualified households that we have to get to this site, is a low number. I did not specifically evaluate the rents that were proposed on this site, but I did do a cursory review of those and felt that they are likely very supportable. So the point, I think, of this assessment is basically to indicate that we've got a huge amount of demand for apartments in Delaware right now. We've got a project that is reasonably appointed and is an option that people are looking for, and that the number of renters that we have to have in order to support the project is reasonable and can support the project.
And would you see, as far as the particular project being 140 units versus 180 units, a huge difference between those two as far as development is concerned?
Well, based on our experience, and again, I probably look at 400 or 500 market studies a year, looking at different project concepts. And I think when you get to this level of amenities, project amenities specifically I'm talking about, you need to have a project of this size to support those project amenities. The other alternative is to really reduce the number of units, but the rents have to go up in order to cover the cost of those amenities. And I think it's important to realize, I use the term need and demand when I first started talking about this, that there's an increasing demand for better quality apartments as we go through time. And we're seeing support from millennials who are moving out of houses, are moving up from more modest price houses, and they want a lot of amenities. And in order to be competitive, in order to attract millennials or keep them within the community, you have to have a project that's well appointed. And I think that in order to cover 180 units and to offer this level of project amenities, you have to have that type of units, or you have to have higher rents. That's the only way it can make itself work. The other point I wanted to make also is that, which a lot of you folks may not realize, is an increasing demand component for apartments is among older adults, the baby boomers. And I would estimate, without actually doing the analysis on it, that close to 20% of the residents who end up moving to this project, if it's built, will end up being older adults.
Do you see an impact on the city as being any different between 140 unit development or 180 unit development? Or is the increase of 40 units in this project going to adversely impact the city or resources?
No, I don't know. I don't think in any way. In fact, I think it creates a greater opportunity to provide a housing choice that doesn't currently exist clearly, especially when you have a vacancy rate of less than 3%. You clearly don't have a lot of rental housing choices.
Are you familiar with any other projects like this within the city of Delaware? I heard you mention Powell and Dublin, which are kind of ring areas, but within the city of Delaware itself, are you familiar with any projects with this level of amenities?
Not like this, no.
And I'm going to have you identify, for the record, would that be your resume?
Yeah, yes, it would.
And would the opinions that you give here this evening be within a reasonable degree of certainty within your professional field?
Absolutely.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions with respect to this and your experience. Let's see here. Would you say that for this development that it'll result in a harmonious grouping of buildings within the proposed development and in relationship to existing and proposed uses on adjacent property?
A harmonious use?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be, sure.
And you looked at this development, will it have adequate public service parking and open spaces?
I'm not an expert on that, Jeff, but yes, I believe it would be. I mean, I have seen projects like this and they lay out very similarly.
Okay. And will it preserve and be sensitive to the natural characteristics of this site as you see it?
Again, I'm not a landscape expert, but based on what I have seen in the past, I think it would address those issues.
How about, you've seen and done studies for how many, 500 or
No, probably 8,000 or 9,000.
8,000 or 9,000
Yeah.
of these?
Over time, in my 38 years.
Okay. Thank you. If anyone has any questions of him, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any of them. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to do one thing. The handout that you gave, is that this, what I have here
Yes,
in
it
my
is.
hand? So you prepared the handout that you provided to the commission as part of your engagement in this case?
That's correct.
And are the opinions that you give in that study, which has been provided, given with any reasonable degree of certainty within your professional field?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis, do you have a copy of that that's not found?
Yes, I do.
Or can I scan it real quick
kind
before you
enough.
leave?
Would you like it now?
I give it.
It doesn't
I got
matter. I just, that would be harder to.
No, I
scan in.
understand.
Thank you.
I have a bunch of exhibits that I'm going to give you
That's
here.
I can do
Yeah,
double side
sure.
scans. Thank you.
Would you please swear the next one?
Could you just please state your name and address for the record?
Sure. Philip Ronald Sabatino.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Mr. Sabatino, can I get you to say your address, please?
Sure. 3895 Stone Ridge Lane, Dublin, Ohio, 43017.
Thank you.
I'm going to be brief because, we've been here a lot. I do have, I think that this is finally near the end of this 300-acre development. Do have some more good news that we've, as your city manager knows, we have signed an agreement for a 3.5-acre built 3.5-acre medical office building out front at Halleck Road by Ohio Health. And so we'll have some more services and hopefully some places soon for their future employees to live. At the previous hearings, I listened carefully. Maybe you noticed, Carolyn, council in particular, the notes that I made. I wasn't at the last meeting here of our neighbors. And I believe that we responded to each and every legitimate comment that we heard that evening. David has reviewed them earlier, but I will quickly go through those changes from the previously approved or previously recommended amendment to the plan. The dumpster, you forgot, the dumpster that we previously had on Boulder Drive has been eliminated. This plan shows a dumpster backing up on Boulder Drive. It has been eliminated in the engineering plans that we've submitted to the city. And we're able to eliminate it easily because staff has asked us to have your refuge pick up from the containers, because many of these apartments have attached garages. So those that have attached garages no longer need to be sized for dumpsters. There were some comments about privacy for the homes that are adjacent to the north of us. And so we've agreed to increase the mound and to make it contiguous, as opposed to the mounds on Halleck Road, in which staff asked us to make those undulating, that the mound along Boulder Drive on the south side will be continuous. We have further added a significant amount of trees. We have over 100 trees now on the Boulder Drive, to where I think I think it'll be opaque, so to speak, that, and I have a rendering that our architect prepared that I'll show everybody. Randall, do you want to help me with this? I don't know if they swear you in just to help me identify.
Could you just please state your name and address for the record? Thank you.
Randall Allen Woodings, Principal, Connor Jonas and Associates, 400 South Fifth Street, Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you.
Actually, I would like him to be sworn in. Would you quickly swear the witness, please?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony about to give and the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Boulder Drive is right here. We had probably a 37 to 40 evergreen trees right there. We've increased that to 70. We've got a mound continuous. There was some question about how the mound worked right here. So to make sure that it's 5 feet at any place along that mound, we will go ahead and put a retaining wall behind our mound so that we can make sure that it is always that way, meets the 1 to 3 slope, and the trees are continuous, and we'll make them into little groups. So as it goes along, it gives a presence of variability instead of just linearness.
Okay. So today I received a copy of a letter from Director Eflin from a neighbor who spoke to, and maybe you can bring an exhibit up there, who spoke to some additional open space land, a triangular piece of land that is north of Boulder Drive. And this is probably as good as an exhibit as any, because it generally shows at the corner of Houck and the proposed future extension of the T in Boulder to the stub of Boulder from Houck. To the top of that, you'll see a little triangular shaped piece of land that Medrock still owns. And she had wrote a letter asking about the deed restrictions in the subdivision that she lives in which the deed restrictions speak to mounding and an easement on that piece of land, specifically behind her home, which I believe is near Houck and the future Boulder Drive. The Boulder Drive plans are complete. We've talked earlier, I think a few months ago, about actually Boulder Drive will be, the engineering plans show the entire Boulder Drive. The entire Boulder Drive is complete. And in that triangular piece on the Boulder Drive plans, which we have agreed 2 months ago to build with this project, that those plans will show the similar mounding that we've done in the past for so the same type of mounding that we showed all along Houck actually is intended and was intended from the beginning of time, not to screen what's to the south, but rather provide some screening to the future road that's there. And we agreed to do that as a condition.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just to clean up, yeah, we did receive a letter and some information from Deborah Logan that I believe the clerk of council had passed on to you all, city council, just for the good of the record, and that's what Mr. Sabatino is referencing. I think the only other question, 2 questions. One being, I don't think it was just mounding, I think it was continuation of the Houck Road landscaping package.
Yes.
On the mound as well.
Yes, we agree.
And then Miss Logan's property, the other question, Miss Logan's property, I believe, is this one right here.
Oh, yeah.
So there's the sort of the wedge piece of Medrock, and then there's I think the same kind of landscape easements and encumbrances on her property too, which I wasn't aware of until this letter was submitted, frankly. But so I think that gets you basically from here up to Houck Road, lest these two houses be in harmony? Is it, this question I have.
So if there's an easement that's recorded there, or even if there isn't and you want to give us an easement, we'll be happy to continue the same type of Houck Road mounding all the way down. The next comments was about Building 7. What happens when we move Building 7? We moved Building 7 away for the purpose of being able to do the continuous mound along Boulder. We didn't have enough room. And actually moved closer to 7 feet. To answer your question, Mr. Halter, previously we were around 25 feet from the driveway in front of, to the south of this building. And so we'll be about 18 feet from it now rather than 25 feet. And we lost 2 parking spaces as well, but we have more than adequate parking. There were comments at the previous council meeting about, well, we'll put the pretty buildings facing us and facing the clubhouse and facing the interior. And we reconfirmed that all of the rears of the buildings will be like the fronts of the buildings, that they'll have this, they'll be identical, right? They're front and back. So we'll have the same amount of natural material and brick on Boulder Drive and on Houck Road as it will on the buildings facing the interior of our community. And I guess lastly, we reduced the amount of traffic from the east, 65 units, of which 40 of those come up here where they belong, closer to Houck Road. That's about all I have, except to say that when you ask questions and we talk about the need for housing, why do you have a need for housing? You have a need for housing for a number of reasons, and I would like to just read a few of them that I think will confirm, and maybe our expert, Mr. Vogt, can speak to it if you have questions. So if there's inadequate housing, as you currently have, as well as what's projected for the future, Mr. Houck can address the approximate amounts of the severe deficit of multifamily housing in the city. You're unable to retain high school students because there's no place to live. And most high school students are not going to move here. Most high school students who choose not to go to college, who don't want to be in their parents' basement, will move in a lower cost apartment that becomes available because we project half of our residents will come stepping up in the desire to have a better place to live. And so 90 units will be available for folks that can't quite afford this. It will serve as a home for workers. Extension of work for retired workers who can live in town. Step down folks, baby boomers who no longer want to maintain a big yard. Existing regional residents who have a change of local employment from the region, who want to have a place to live close to where they work or where they desire to want to be. Returning and retaining college graduates, which you may know Ohio Westland is focused on trying to have some places for the retired residents to come back. And probably as important as any, attracting new residents to the community. So I guess in summary, I agree with your staff, and we're here tonight to ask for a decision to approve this project. I'm here with the other representatives from Tammy and Ron, TNR Properties, to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
I did have a couple, actually, I wanted you to identify.
I meant for staff.
No, I understand, but I need you for the record. Would ordinance 9974 and 9976, these be the two ordinances that were passed with respect to this property back in 1999?
Yes, I was here then.
And you don't look that old. Would this be the final development plan that was approved by those ordinances?
This is, but it seems to not include the complete exhibit that Mr. Eflin showed earlier in his screen.
But did the original development plan in 99 envision that densities would be moved around in this particular plan unit development?
Yes, in fact, it says it in the development plan. I think over 20 years, this is really the second amendment, which is pretty good. The first, Carolyn, as you know, was when the YMCA and the Armory went in there. We had to amend it to allow for the M1 modification. And then this is really the only second one in the past 20 years, in which we're simply reducing density and shifting some closer to the artery.
And lastly, would this project be economically feasible at less than 180 units?
I know you won't like this, but we really need we need 200. We can live with 180.
Do you have anything else? Mr. Chairman, if I might be so bold, if I might ask Mr. Eflin the question.
I'll allow.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Eflin, you're familiar with 112909, the review criteria that are to be looked at when the city considers development plans.
Are you? I'm not. I'm not.
If I might approach Mr. Eflin, just kind of have him take a look at this, actually.
Okay.
Need some glasses?
I might.
Could I ask you to just peruse those criteria that are to be considered with respect to, not out loud, but yeah, just I think there's 8 criteria there that are supposed to be considered, having to do with impact on the city and harmonious nature of the development, that kind of stuff.
Dave, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Are you familiar with that? Okay.
Yeah.
This is our current 1129.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes, sir. And you, I'm certain that your staff has considered all these criterion and find that this project comports with this criterion in 1129.
Yes, we're
Yeah.
recommending approval.
Okay, thank you.
You want these back?
Thank you.
I apologize for taking so long with you guys tonight. Any questions for us?
That's a lot of information. You mentioned an acceptable return on investment. What would you consider as an acceptable return on this investment for these luxury apartments?
I'm going to turn that question over to Tammy or Mr. Vogt.
Oh, excuse me. Mr. Prawl. So an acceptable return on investment depends on many things, but in general, a 15% return is considered a good investment in real estate. This project, as it stands today, is a 6.74% return. So why would we proceed? The number one reason is because as as the risks go up or when the risks go down. So when the risk is low, an investor will take a lower rate of return because they're more guaranteed of that rate of return. And because of that, because of the demand for housing in Delaware County, City, Delaware, and because of all the amenities we're providing, and because of the quality of the product that we're providing, we are confident that it will be a great property for the city of Delaware. Thus, that's why we're willing to set that lower rate of return. If we do reduce the number of units, that reduces the rate of return significantly, almost 30% of the 6.74.
And what if you reduce some of the amenities? One of the things that's on here is a pool, and you mentioned there's a lot of the cost and maintenance and stuff with that. What would that do to your return if there's no pool? And I only mention that as, a citizen here. You have a YMCA within 100 yards of you type thing. Would reducing that type of cost add to your rate of return? I mean, I would assume it would.
Sir, we want to present this to you tonight. We're here to answer any questions.
Yes, but she's the one who made the remark on
and we're not going to reduce the amenities that are projected in this project.
Okay.
Curious, within this revised request, we're reducing further the number in Area 4. And I guess kind of makes me think about what about the rate of return there if we've reduced those by that many to be able to get this. What's going to happen in the future with that project? And I realize you can come back and ask for more units again, I believe, at some point in the future. Whether the body would accept that or not, I don't know.
Good question. I've been here for 20 years or more. I'll be here in a few years when we get there. That site is not suited for apartments because it lacks the visibility. We anticipate that will be built for sale, townhouses, not for an apartment community. Because you're right. I mean, we put a low-income housing tax credit property there, and we'd have more neighbors. But I would suspect that it's more likely than not that site will be townhouses or attached houses for sale.
I have a question. We heard several times here about people, the percentage is what, 2%, 3% for, right. And then there was comments made about losing people or people being lost because they can't move in here. What's that rate? Do we know? Or is that just how many people are moving away from the community because they don't have access to apartments? I'm not so sure I can be prepared to guess what that. So it's not quantifiable? There's no number with it? It's pretty tough to guess what that is, but I can assure you that there are folks who would be moving from the area.
Sorry to interrupt. I know Mr. Lewis wants a record. Here, you can use my mic.
All I was going to say was that I think that I do know when we look at an apartment property and mobility of tenants, that people are moving in and out of areas. It's going on constantly. And if they can't find the kind of housing that they want in a community, they're going to move elsewhere outside of that community.
What's the average stay for people within apartments, within this community?
I don't have those specific numbers. 2.5 years, though, is a general number that we use when we're looking at turnover of apartment tenants. But I'm not sure if it's applicable. It's probably a lot longer here because there aren't choices available. So if you don't have a choice to move into, you're going to stay in your apartment longer.
Would that certainly be the case with retired folks who would downsize from the city of Delaware?
Well, older adults that move into apartments stay in apartments for a very long time. 10 to 12 years oftentimes, just because they don't want to have to move again.
The 2% vacancy that the city has as a whole is really 100% full, because when somebody moves out, the management staff has to turn the unit over, clean the carpet or replace the carpet, paint the walls. And so that 2% is, frankly, the turnover time.
Yeah, I'd just make a general comment from my perspective type of thing. It seems to be a little misconception. For my 3.5 years on the planning and development, we've been on record multiple times saying the city needs multiple housing types at multiple price points. In fact, that's even addressed in the comprehensive plan itself. So I don't want anybody to get a misconception that we are not looking for multiple housing types at multiple pricing points, because we certainly are. I mean, I know the city of Delaware is, I know myself for my 3.5 years here on the development is as well. So please don't walk away thinking we're not looking for those type of things, which we are.
Yeah, I guess I look at all the property out there that's been developed up next to this thing. And a lot of the people that bought houses there, hopefully, they saw this big piece of vacant land and they asked a realtor or somebody, what's going in there? I mean, is it going to be a factory? Is it going to be a shopping center? What's going to be in there? And they were probably told that, well, it's going to be multifamily, and if they check things far enough, I have to say, I know I have when I moved into different places, 140 apartments. Yeah, I can live with that. Okay? Now that it's going up, I'm just wondering, do they have a right to be concerned? Do they have a right to have something to say that they don't want that much density when they not what they were told when they built there? I mean, I'm asking you because you didn't build all those houses, don't get me wrong, but you brought the whole thing in and had it zoned. I'm always concerned about the people who are already there, what their property rights are, what their concerns should be.
And that's why we've answered all of the legitimate concerns. We've got the buffering, whether there's 180 or 200, which I understand there's not going to be 200. It's invisible. The change of the density behind that mound and the 100+ trees, how many dwellings in there are invisible to the neighbors in north, except for one thing. There's that many fewer with this proposal today. There's that many fewer, 65 fewer homes. They're going to be coming down Boulder Drive. 65 fewer homes. I don't know, how many trips a day do you have for a house? 9?
So the Boulder Drive only will dump into Hawk Road?
We have no exit on we have no exit on Boulder Drive. This apartments, but the
no. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We are moving 65 homes from the east on Boulder Drive that are permitted up to Hawk Road. And even though Mr. Weber would prefer we have an exit here to Boulder Drive, it only goes out to Hawk Road. So there's 65 fewer families, 500 trips a day, that are not going to be driving by or through these streets.
I think there's actually another answer to your question, which I think is a good one. If folks had checked, as you would have pulled up the development plan that was approved by the city 20 years ago. What the development plan says, and the city agreed to, the development proposal utilizes classical traditional land planning, loading more intensive uses adjacent to the points of entry into the planned development, with land use intensity decreasing as distance from the point of entry to the site and arterial rights of way increases, and buffering external impacting factors to progress from more intensive to less intensive uses. So your point is a good one. And if somebody had taken a look at the development plan, they would have foreseen and said, you know what, this development plan envisions changes in these sub-area densities, and this could be more dense than is in the development plan. And the city has also, by contract, as Mr. Schuman will tell you, agreed that these are the kinds of criterion that the city would consider in doing this development. So this is a landowner too. He's a citizen landowner of your community too. He has vested rights that are provided for by law. So again, your question is a good one, and had the research been done, whoever researched it would see, you know what, this could be 180 units.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Okay. I know that if I would have called the city and said, this piece of property is sitting out there, what's it zoned for? They would have probably told me 140 apartments.
No, that's not true.
Dave, what would you have told me? I mean, I'm just wondering.
What would I have hypothetically told you in
Hypothetically, you told
1999?
me.
What I would have told you is that there's a table that says multifamily area 3 has a maximum of 140 units on that piece of ground. That's what I think I would have told you at that time, but that it's part of overall planned unit development.
And I'll restate.
So
my-
you're saying that they should have gone beyond that, found the original thing that did, and these are first time I bought a house, I was just glad to find it was on a street. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't mean to be a smarter. I'm just trying to reason in my mind, okay, what they can kind of expect.
Let me say it again, okay? Whether there's 180 homes here, apartment homes, or 200, it's invisible to the people to the north with the plan that we've submitted.
You
I'm
may,
sorry, I'd like
and
to
that's
ask the
fine.
audience to keep it chatter down, please.
Mr. Chairman, the audience will have a chance to
Yes,
speak as well
absolutely.
after you're done with them, so everyone
Absolutely.
just holds on. And I do want to point out one more thing. The attorney here is doing his part with his case. If you want to speak, you don't have to have me swear you or anything. You can say stuff. So I just want to make sure, you don't have to feel like I'm going to be asking you questions or anything. You can just speak. So sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you for the clarification.
My concern for the density for this one is as much for the residents that'll be living there. When I look at it, I just don't see a lot of green space for the residents inside that area. And we've talked about this on multiple cases that come through. I'm always looking for, what kind of green space can we add for the residents within this community? I see a pool, I see a bocce. I don't really see much in the way of other that paving, no walking path, other than what would be, along Houck. But internal to there, what kind of extra green space can we get?
Let me bring Mr. Vogt back up to answer the question. I will tell you that the gross density, and Mr. Eflin and I calculated together for this, is 10.4 units per acre. That is medium density. My company is currently beginning to build 180 units in a suburb of Pittsburgh on an area, a suburb, half the size. I'm going to bring Mr. Vogt up to talk about density and why 10.4 units per acre is not high density compared to what the other.
I really don't, for myself, I don't need Mr. Vogt, that type of thing, because again, I'm looking for the green space for the residents type of thing, regardless of retention and detention ponds that are on there. Just generally, this is what we've always talked about with the planning commission is green space for the residents, whether it's a single family housing or multifamily housing, whatever the case might be. And typically we'd look for like a little walking path, maybe gazebos, something that adds to that type of thing. You're talking about building a luxury apartment stuff, but do we see those extra little amenities, walking path to the pond with a little gazebo and a bench type of thing? And that's why I go back to the green space.
Yes, you have those in this plan.
It just doesn't appear that central area has that much green space. I mean, by my mind.
Dave, can you put up the plan again? I mean, you have to.
Color rendering.
The color,
Yeah. it just might be helpful so they can understand what they're both talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I see the pond in the middle and the, bocce and the pool, and then just that little bit of green there, nothing.
It's difficult to tell by the scale. I mean, there's a deck, benches, a community garden, dog park, I mean, it's difficult to tell by that scale. That's why, again, I agree with the professional recommendation of the city staff.
Do we have any additional questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I might ask the clerk to enter these into the record, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you. These were the. No, thank you.
All right, at this time, we are going to open up the, oh, she's going to get the list, perfect. We're going to open up this discussion for public comment. Hopefully you had an opportunity to put your name on the list outside of the chambers prior to the meeting. If you haven't, you'll have an opportunity at the end. I'll ask if there are any additional comments. What I'd like to do this evening is limit everybody to 3 minutes. Please be as brief as possible, but please feel free to share your point and avoid repeating things as much as possible. A lot of you probably have the same comments, so as much of the repetition as we can eliminate, it's very much appreciated. So at this time, I'll go ahead and just start down the list, asking people to come forward. When you come forward, please state your name and your address for the record prior to speaking. Thank you. At this time, I'll call Scott Kinslow.
I'm Scott Kinslow, 107 Diverston Way here in Delaware. I was down to 2 minutes, 20 seconds, but I think because of new information that's arrived tonight, I might need 3.5. I want to clarify a couple things. Minimum criterion, as it was spoken. We appreciate the planning department of not letting them build anything beyond or at least meet the minimum that they need to for building. However, I believe they're maximizing to create an oversaturation of the small area. Another comment, fewer units to support this level of amenities. They tell you that this forces a higher rent. No, it doesn't have to. It reduces the ROI, which you can get back over a little bit more time. So what they hadn't spoken of, what that return of investment is over what period of time. It may take a little bit more time for them to get that ROI without all of the amenities. Let me, one more thing to clarify. Over all of these months since we've been notified of these meetings, at no point did MedRock or Mr. Sabatino or anybody from the developer contact any of us to speak about this project or find out what our concerns were as they asked. There was a call that was placed on Saturday morning to the Homeowners Association to request a meeting. This was just this past Saturday, to request a meeting to find out what our concerns were. I believe that this call could have been made any time in the last 5 months. And if you really want to find out what the concerns are, ask the neighbors that are adjacent to this property, not necessarily the Homeowners Association. So real quickly, at the close of our last meeting with City Council, Mayor advised the developer to update their changes, work on a better transition for the nearby neighborhoods, the buffer areas and tweaks that they said were to be in the works, and also the reduction in density. I will also say, and I don't have this word for word, but in the last meeting, Mr. Sabatino made an analogy that Area 3 and Area 4 are one property, just like our front yard and backyard, and that this was a simple matter of moving some chairs from the backyard to the front yard and also removing some chairs altogether. Our response would be is that there is a threshold that there was a threshold established many years ago that stated that a maximum of 140 chairs would be permitted for Area 3. There's a point at which you can only have so many chairs, and to the point where you don't have enough room to sit on them, and I think that's what happens. We believe that that threshold is 140 chairs. Further reduction of 10 more units on Area 4 does not help the compaction of the units and the people and the vehicles in Area 3. City Council also asked the developer to work on the density, and this feels more like a slap in the face. It doesn't help what we're working with here.
Could you please wrap up?
Yes. We accept, or I appreciate that the buildings along Boulder now have four-sided architecture, dumpster relocated, and clarification of double row trees along the mounting. I don't think that moving a bit, again, things changed this evening, so the paperwork, the packet says the building is moving 4 feet. He says it's going to be moving a little bit further. We also have to recognize that I think it's building 7 is approximately 110, maybe the other building is approximately 110 feet away from the nearest home on Harmony Drive, physical building to building. Clarify on the thin triangle that Mr. Sabatino spoke of, we would like that the Planning Commission.
I'm sorry, you're well over the time.
I'll finish up here real quick. I'm the first one, I'm not repeating anything. I understand, I respect. I'm real quick here. We want to make sure that that triangle that has not been completed, that's going to be part of the Boulder intersection, is actually piggybacked to the construction. We haven't seen any plans for Boulder. We would like the commission to recognize that this piece of land is actually going to be part of the Boulder Road construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, out of respect for the process, if I ask you to limit your time to 3 minutes, please understand that that's a fair rule for everybody, and I expect that rule to be honored. Everybody will have an opportunity to speak. Karen Kaufman.
My name's Karen Kaufman. I live at 107 Diverston Way in Delaware, Ohio. I think my biggest concern is the density. I specifically remember the council asking him to work on that, and he didn't. I mean, I'm talking about what's going to be built now, not something that's going to happen in the future. He did not work on the density. And then the other concern that I have is he does not take care of the properties that he has now. Right at the corner of State Route 36 and Halk Road, Mr. Eflin had to threaten Sabatino not to give him building permits until he took care of that piece of property. He did one time. It looks like hell. Go drive by it today. So I just don't have any level of confidence that he's going to take care of these apartments, and they're right in my backyard. So, thanks.
Thank you. Andrew Strassman. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Strassman, 227 Rock Mill Street, Delaware. We're here today because Medrock is following an old classic negotiation strategy called what's mine is mine and what's yours gets renegotiated. Here's how it works. You negotiate with someone, get an agreement, say to get permission for you to build buildings, and then you pocket your winnings and restart your negotiations, but only over what the other side gave you. Not what you promised them, because you're promised to follow the zoning rules. When the other side objects, you threaten to sue, you complain, and you do whatever it takes, because once you get people agreeing to renegotiate a deal that already exists, you've got them, and then you come back and change things again and again. In fact, in the current proposal, it sets up the next round of changes, because if Delaware permits Area 3 to be of higher density, then once they've got that, once they can pocket that, they can come back and say, well, you gave us permission to be this dense. Your safety issues, Mr. Paul, your greenery issues, all those concerns can be just waved away and they can start again and come back again and again for further changes. The good news is that because this strategy is so well known, the counter strategy is also known. It's very simple. The only way to win is not to play their game. Zoning rules are zoning rules. They have got to follow the same rules as everybody else. No changes and no special deals, because if you give in to them now, demands are the beginning. And tonight we heard Mr. Sabatino clearly say that he is still interested in the full 200. Give him what he wants now, and he'll be back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jamie Terinsky. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Jamie Terinsky, 313 Johann Street. I have a question, well, obviously. I haven't really seen anything about the walking trails again. I know they said that there was going to be a temporary solution while the property is being built, but what is actually going to happen to the walking trails that everyone's been using for the 2 weeks, walking over to the Y, the park, jogging on? It'd just be nice to have that addressed. I also, there has been a petition going around for the denial of this. There are currently 400 signatures on this petition asking for this to be denied from current Delaware residents. And some are actually people that are currently building a house here or nearby in the neighboring neighborhoods. I don't know if you guys want to see this, but this is the list of all 400 names of residents and soon-to-be current residents. So that's all.
And you're new to this. Usually what happens when someone brings an exhibit or petition, they can share, but the clerk will take that and put it in the record like the other stuff. And I apologize for interrupting. Chairman.
No, thank you for the clarification.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just have one question. On the walking paths, you're talking about the path on Houck, and the question is, what happens during construction?
Well,
because the pathway
I know
might get
it's
cut
going to-
off and stuff?
Mainly, I want to know what's going to happen to it after construction. Like, is it going to stay on that same side of the street, or like how are people? I know obviously there's going to be a temporary solution during construction. I just would like it to be addressed of what's actually going to happen to it permanently once everything is done, just because that's a very well-used path. That's, I mean, just today, there's a ton of little kids and families walking back and forth to the parks. So I would just like to know what the actual solution or plan is for that.
I know we usually take questions and hold answers for them, but while we're on this particular topic, I think the notion is during construction, the pathway will still, there was some question about, does it shift across Houck? Does it not shift across Houck? I believe the resolution to that is that it will still be maintained basically where it is right now. So you can continue to walk even during construction. And then post-construction, it will definitely be repaired or replaced, whatever is required as a result of the construction to maintain the pathway along Houck. And in fact, the path, there's a bit of path along the stub of Boulder now. Boulder Drive gets completed to Houck, that pathway network would be completed as well. Matt, is that right? Is that all right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maggie Reed, please state your name and address for the record when you reach the podium.
Good evening. My name is Maggie Reed, and I live at 212 Harmony Drive, Delaware, Ohio. You're going to get 2 for 1 tonight. The letter that was sent in by Deb Logan, she is a neighbor of mine and a friend, and she asked me to read it tonight. Obviously, you've already had an opportunity to read it, and I want to ask the question because a lot of people here in the room may not have seen this letter. Would it be permissible for me to go ahead and read it, or you prefer not? There's a lot of people in the room that have not.
I'll allow it.
Okay. Thank you. So this is from Deb Logan. She lives at 102 Diverston Way, and that's in Delaware. Regretfully, she is not able to attend tonight because she teaches college classes on Wednesday nights, so that's the reason she asked me to read this letter. She has lived at 102 Diverson Way since 2012. I understand that change is an important part of every community. Delaware is a great community, and I respect the rights of every property owner within the city. Prior to purchasing my property within Adderley Park neighborhood, I did due diligence and contacted the city of Delaware. I was informed that the density to the south of Adderley Park was anticipated to be similar to the comprehensive plan at the time and a transition to the YMCA to the south. Like other residents in Adderley Park, I bought my property with the understanding that 140 units would be on the property known as Area 3. While the proposed development is a transition between YMCA to the south and the high-density 180-unit apartment complex on a small space is not appropriate. It is not in keeping with the community of Delaware, and it is not what the residents of Adderley Park were told would be in Area 3 prior to purchasing our properties. And I also was told the same thing. Should this development proceed with your approval, I respectively request that the developer of this property, the same developer as the one who proposed our development, be required, as initially proposed, to provide the plant material that was initially planned for our neighborhood along the proposed collector, also known as Boulder, between Harmony Drive and South Houck Road. Under Article 12 of my deed restrictions, Medrock has a 25-foot deep landscaping easement across the entire back of my property, which is lot 8649. This landscape buffer is hereby reserved to the developer. With the landscaping restrictions, proximity and height of the proposed buildings, I feel the developer's restrictions will negatively impact and impede any possibility of privacy for my property. The property owners along South Houck Road were afforded a landscape buffer to mitigate the effects of new development. I request that a condition be included as part of this approval to provide a similar landscape buffer on each of the properties on the north side of Boulder. Specifically, I respectfully request that each of the property owners directly to the north have installed one 7 to 8 foot evergreen tree every 15 feet, one 2 to 3, I think caliber, I'm not sure what she's got here, average 1 to 2, 3 inch average shade tree, maple or oak per 50 feet. I think she means 2 to 3 feet, not inches. And 2 ornamental flowering trees, 10 to 12 feet high or tall per 100 of adjacent property lines along the southern line of this property. Once again, thank you for the time and consideration as we continue to work together to make Delaware a wonderful community where people want to live. I can't answer any questions people might have about the letter, but I did guarantee her that I could read it for her.
If you could just please wrap up, though.
Yes. Oh, so my 3 minutes are tagged to her 3 minutes.
Yes, unfortunately.
Well, that's not fair. You get 2 for 1 tonight. The only question I have, and I'll wrap up very quickly here. I've heard a lot of the concerns. I have the same concerns as my neighbors in Adderley Park and the surrounding communities. What I have yet to hear from this developer is what's in it for us. That is a basic question. It's a human basic question. It's not selfish. It's practical and it's logical. What's in it for me? What's in it for the people in my neighborhood? We have a lot of concerns, but we have yet to hear what benefits do we get out of this change. The developer is asking for our support. He's asking for Delaware's support. But yet, we that are closest to this change and being impacted the most by this change, we don't understand, at least I don't understand, what's the benefit for me. I just have a lot of concerns. So until somebody can explain to me and my neighbors what's the benefit for us, I just can't get behind this change. Not at 180 units. 140, I can buy into that. But 180, to me, those additional units only bring revenue to the developer, not necessarily to the residents or the city of Delaware.
Thank you. see. Okay. Nancy Mormon. Please state your name and address for the record.
Nancy Mormon, 151 Diverston Way, Delaware, Ohio. I've adjusted my comments based on what my neighbors have said, and I wanted to say that the comments made at the last meeting regarding Mr. Sabatino's character were not representative of all of us, and I'm expecting that this is going to be a lovely community, and I appreciate Mr. Sabatino hiring and having these professionals here, but I would like to say that he can hire as many professionals as he wants. We're not addressing the core issues, and this is about traffic, density, and buffering. And even though a majority of the council voiced their concerns about the density of this project with the additional 40 units and generously offered in good faith for Mr. Sabatino to send his request back to the Planning Commission for him to make improvements, it appears that Mr. Sabatino has made very little changes or improvement to the site. And it continues to be argued by Mr. Sabatino and his professionals that they're reducing the total number of units. But again, that reduction does not help us here. The other tract has more feeder roads and no homes around that tract. There are 80 homes that are right next to tract number 3. And it's only going to have 2 roads, Houck Road and DeGenova Way, which feeds to Houck Road. Now, we understand that the city planners, the city engineers have said that Houck Road can handle this traffic, and I'm sure they're right about that. But what about DeGenova Way at Houck Road, right at the Y? Currently, and many times during the day, it's very difficult. You can go anytime during the day and sit there for about a half an hour. You're going to see how difficult it is to turn out of DeGenova Way onto Houck Road. With this increase in units, it could potentially add 40 to 100 more cars at that intersection there. And so I'm asking the Planning Commission, is this traffic safe for the people who walk to the YMCA? Is it safe, the traffic safe for kids who ride their bikes to the YMCA? Is it safe for the mothers who walk their children in strollers to the Y? And for joggers? This is a hot mess with just 140 units. This is going to be an accident waiting to happen with 180 units. With regards to density, this increase of 40 units is almost a 30% increase of units. And it's going to cause the apartments to be closer to our neighborhood. As has been mentioned, we bought into the city of Delaware off Houck Road in Adelaide Park with the understanding that there was going to be a maximum of 140 units at this site. Now, Mr. Sabatino wants to add in these additional units to give this area unprecedented density. Lastly, buffering. Even the revised plan does not provide adequate buffering. Mr. Sabatino continues to mention that it doesn't really matter if there are 140 units or 180 units, that doesn't matter. If that were true, why is he appealing it and trying to add 40 more units if it didn't matter? Closing up, we're asking that the Planning Commission deny the request to add the 40 additional units, remove those units from the plan, and the buildings closer to Boulder, reducing the number of units will increase the buffering and make this area more acceptable to the residents in the corridor. We want you to make a decision that's best for all of Delaware and not just for this developer to make more money. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we've made it through everybody who signed in on the sign-up sheet. Out of courtesy for the public and your due process and opportunity to speak, is there anybody else in the public who'd like to speak on this case tonight? Sure, please approach the microphone and state your name and your address for the record.
My name is Kathleen Trotter, and I'm at 524 Leonard Woods Boulevard. I'm much further from this development than anybody else that spoke tonight. We're across Houck Road. My concern is you allowed the YMCA to come in, and that's great. It's a great area. I think it's terrific for that, but the problem is there are a lot of people that go there. They go to the water park. We have the armory there. There's lots of traffic already. People are used to using that walking path, the jogging trail. They walk and they ride their bicycles. They pull wagons and carriages. They spend a lot of time on that. With 140 units there, with people traveling in and out, it's going to be much more difficult. 180 is way over the limit for that. When we bought, we pretty much knew what was going on around us, and 140 units is what we were told at the time. I realized that they had the opportunity to come back and say, we want more, but you're just opening the doors for everybody to want more. And that's my concern. I just think that the traffic situation is really difficult, especially with the water park in the summertime, the kids playing soccer, all the things that go on at the Y and the Armory. There's so much traffic already. 140 units is I consider it the max. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak tonight? Please approach the podium and state your name and your address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Kozowski. I live at 154 Blakemore, and I'm the president of the Adelaide Park Homeowners Association. I just wanted to give you two short things, and then we can all go home. I've had reason to check on senior housing, which was talked about. And if you want to contact Arthur Place, you will find that their rents run somewhere $600 to $800 a month, and they have a 2-year waiting list for people who want to move in. Okay. And the other thing is, Mr. Sabatino did contact us last Saturday to meet with us, but unfortunately, our association has members that work out of town and various other things, and we were unable to meet with him. When I bought my house, it was 2004. I'm one of the longtime residents, and I was told that that property was to be high-end condominiums. And you will probably find, if you would talk to my neighbors, that that is exactly what they were told also. And for the final thing, the intersection at Houck Road and Diverston Drive is a mess. It's basically, one of these days, it's going to be a death trap because you cannot see to the north. And if you're pulling out to go south, you have to cross over into that. And sorry, by the time you get out and get ready to go into that traffic where you're moving, they come around the bend. The thing is too high. And I am going to bring pictures and so forth to City Council. But that's all I have to say. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak tonight? Sure. Please approach the podium and state your name and your address for the record.
My name is Stuart Klinger, 113 Blakemore Drive, which is the triangle I just learned about tonight. I'd like to know a little bit more about the mounding and so forth that would be taking place there, since it is my backyard. Questions that I have that you can propose to the people. The mounding along the newly proposed retention pond along Houck Road, they're going to change the shape from being round to more of an oblong. Will there be mounding around that along Houck Road? As far as the trees that are going to go up on Boulder, is there an initial minimum size for those trees? How many full-time or employees will be working there at this apartment complex on a regular basis, which is additional traffic? The question that I've wondered about, what was the initial profitability study that was done? I believe Ms. Potts brought that up. The initial profit versus the proposed profit with the increase of 40 units. I mean, how much more profit do you need? When I moved in to my home in 2007, I talked to city engineers, talked to one of them in the old engineering building next door here. They brought up a map. They said this area, like was mentioned before, is probably going to be condominium because they didn't really want transient people moving in and out in an area where there was so many single-family dwellings. They also told me that right across from where this proposal is, the wooded plot to the southwest corner of where Boulder and Houck Road will be, is an institutional area for like a school or a bus barn. I don't know if that's been changed or not, but if you put a school there, that's going to be a lot of traffic there eventually. If it's a bus barn, you're going to have even more at certain times of the day. To help with the elimination or reduction of traffic, which is a major part of this issue, I would suggest that committee consider if the developer is going to go ahead and develop Boulder from the spur that we have there at Harmony over to Harmony, I would say that let's go ahead and complete it further to the east, connect it to the parking lot that's at the Y, so that it gives them a secondary entrance to go out of their units and a different spot to go to Houck Road. I think that's all I got. I ran out of numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on this case tonight? Please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Walter Campbell, 900 Canal Street, Delaware. I was at probably most all the meetings previous here, and then was in the same building but the other group. And the very last meeting that we had, the people said they would take it back and I think, you know, revise it and whatever. And my wife and I was wondering, what are they going to do? You know, how much lower? We were really expecting they would go lower. But really what I saw and heard tonight was a group coming to be sworn in, so we know they say the truth and get what they want. You know, 180 is too much. The people to the north would be invisible, but all those cars will be out on the road like that. But also the final thing for me, I'm a baby boomer, I guess. And if I want, I don't think I would ever go into an apartment like that. Why would I want to spend more money for rent than what I have for a house payment now, or even a lot of baby boomers have their houses paid for? You know, the group here, the older people that are 2-year waiting list, whatever. I mean, why would I want to go there where you probably wouldn't even find a parking spot? You know, you'd be crouching all the kids and everything. I just can't believe it. A lot of baby boomers are going down and going into rentals. Like, I know I wouldn't, but did I expend my 3 minutes? Thank you.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Any other members of the public tonight who'd like to speak on this case? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to bring that back to this body and to the applicant. If you'd like to come forward, we'll see if we can work our way through some of the questions here and at least provide some color commentary or maybe some additional comments on any of these particular items. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's been a long day.
Why don't we just take a brief 5-minute recess, please?
Yeah.
We'll resume in 5 minutes.
Just water?
One thing I need. Okay. You want to go ahead and add it once we, I'd rather do it before I forget. It's just when you're here.
On account of age, is that what it is?
All right, I'd like to call the meeting back to order.
Mr. Chairman, just one thing that Mr. Weber pointed out to me. Recommended staff condition recommendation number 11 regarding refuse collection was inadvertently carried over from the original recommendation. And it indicates subscribe to city refuse service. Obviously, the mayor knows that we've had that conversation heading into the last round of council. So all that said, we just amend our recommendation to strike 11 in its entirety. I just wanted to, sorry I'm interrupted, but if we don't, I'm going to forget that.
Condition number 11 on 2018-0027?
Correct. Thank you.
Do we want to handle that now, or do we want to wait till the end?
That's just, I guess I'm officially amending our staff recommendation for you. So
Okay.
I don't think you have to take a vote on that, in my
Okay.
opinion. We can ask Darren when he gets back, or Mr. Lewis is an attorney. He's nodding his head, yeah. It's our recommendation, so if you want to add or change or modify any of the others as a commission, then obviously I talk about that and do that as a body like you normally do.
Okay. All right. Let's work our way through some of the questions that we have. We addressed the walking trails when that comment came up. Again, traffic is something that continues to come up. I would just, provide your opinion.
Yeah.
As previously stated.
Sure. Our job as city engineers is to be objective, and I'll state something pretty similar to what I did in the first round of hearings, is that Traffic Engineering 101 tells me to put an access point across Harmony, from Harmony on Boulder. But I know that on this particular site would be very problematic and controversial. So we backed away from that very early on when we started to look at plans for this site. The site does require, for fire department requirements, 2 access points. So the only other viable option is to access off of DeGenova Way. Not ideal, but that's where we're at today. Again, the alternative would be to create a curb cut on Boulder. Overall, we are satisfied that the impacts to Houck won't be any more severe than the original traffic study contemplated. Actually, you have a net reduction in trips on Houck Road, theoretically, with reduction in units. Lastly, Boulder Drive will provide, I heard the question, Boulder Drive would provide a secondary access to the park. I think that's an important component of this plan, or eventually the residential that's forthcoming as a subsequent section of Adelaide Park. I do want to clarify that the requirement on this project is to only build Boulder from Houck to Harmony. So technically this project will not make that connection to the park unless the applicant wants to amend his plan.
If I might add to your comments, Boulder Drive, as we agreed earlier months ago, the design is finished. I'm going to see it tomorrow. It'll be in next week for the entire length. And we've agreed with staff that the missing connection at DeGenova Way, that it's such a small connection, like 40 feet, that we added that to our plan so that when we build Boulder Drive, we'll connect to that. Now, the lady who spoke earlier about DeGenova being a lot of cars at Houck Road, and really that's the only way in now. But so the residents back there, can't go in and out. They have to come out to Houck and back in. So we're going to make that connection with the next phase of Boulder Drive. That there's no zoning change for it, that we'll build this year. It'll have another 85 single-family homes, and the construction thereof hopefully doesn't have to cut through, these neighborhood streets and come right out Boulder Drive.
Another thing that came up, I believe, was the mounding and the size of the trees being proposed. David, if you could just talk maybe a little bit about how they're complying with what, I guess, the regulations are and how that compares with what the minimum requirement would be.
Yeah, there really is no minimum requirement for mounding or buffer landscaping in the PUD text that I can read, or necessarily, it is a PUD, so between these sub areas. However, I think recognizing we have a changing of use here between multifamily and single family, even though we have Boulder Drive, our recommendation was a 5 to 6 foot high continuous mound. I think the applicants agreed to cure the hole in the mound that we've noted on the plan here tonight. So it would be at least a 5 foot high mound all the way across essentially the frontage of Boulder, with recognizing the lessons that we've learned and we heard here tonight, that we don't want to have mounding and landscaping near the intersection of Boulder and Houck for the site distance issues that we've heard. But that's sort of near the pond anyway. And then with respect to the height of the trees, our recommended condition is minimum 6 foot high evergreen trees in a staggered course at planting. I'm not an arborist, but our arborist has remarked often that while you certainly can require higher or taller trees to be planted at planting, and you kind of get a taller instant screen that way, often they don't grow nearly as fast or root as well as 6 foot evergreen trees. So that's just something to consider, and that's the nature of our recommendation here. The species and the exact planting and such, obviously we would get a final landscape plan should this proceed forward, and that would all have to proceed to the Shade Tree Commission for our recommendation, our normal course of events as well for their recommendation. Does that answer your question?
I think to the best possible. Another question that came up was, and we briefly went over this, I think, but the properties that are now going to be on the north side of, is it Boulder Drive? Yeah, the properties on the north side of Boulder Drive, the triangular shape, and I believe there's another piece. Could you just briefly go over again what the plan is for the mounding and landscaping in those particular areas?
Yes, I discussed it earlier with Director Upland, and we agreed that I didn't understand that it went all the way down Harmony until the homeowner clarified it tonight. But we agreed to meet the same standards, I think as she requested, of the undulating mound on Houck with the intermittent trees. And it is on the Boulder Drive plan. The Boulder Drive discussion from months ago was not intended to be built, but it's all on one plan. It's in here, and we'll build it at the same time before people move in here.
Okay. And then there was a question about mounding around the retention pond. I believe is it abuts Houck Road. I think we previously stated that we were trying to reduce the amount of mounding around that area for the traffic.
Yeah, so in my opinion, they could give us theirs, is that the mound that starts on Boulder Drive will not start in earnest until about halfway down that pond or so, give or take. So you're off the intersection. And then there would be low undulating mounding like per the Houck Road landscape plan in front of the pond along Houck Road as well. That's a recommended condition. Again, we would want to pull that back from the intersection to make sure that we have, I would say, more than adequate sight lines. Would you agree with that, Matt?
Correct, because the access point is on the inside of a curve.
Right.
So we got to be particularly careful to pull the mounting back.
So there may not be any mounting right to a point close to that Boulder Drive Houck
Sure.
intersection, and the same goes true for the main entrance. And even Genova Way, there's some mounding shown there, but it does appear to be pretty far back.
Yeah, there's existing mounding there now with the bike path, both of which will remain, except for the one entrance that will cross, and it'll be gravel for that entrance till construction is finished. Our construction entrance is there. That's kind of the best place for the heavier traffic, not to go through the neighborhood or de Genova, but to come right out on Houck Road, and we'll maintain it. Regarding the mounding, we'll maintain the line of sight. We'll work with the engineers and the staff, which are often on our sites, and multiple people sometimes, to make sure that the line of sight is more than adequate at the intersections.
Are you going to put a fence by that pond?
Do you want to go first, or shall I go?
We're going to require a pond
Yeah.
barrier.
So-
We do have to be careful with the design for the same reasons we just talked about the mounding. We don't want to put up a barrier. Barrier is going to be closer to the pond, further away from the road. So we need to take time and make sure we design it correctly for the same reasons, line of sight.
Yeah.
So
So
the
mo-
fence can block the line of sight as
Well,
well.
man, just to clarify, I don't know if the mayor meant a fence around the pond or a guardrail like. Okay.
There'll be appropriate barriers on, Houck Road at Boulder, depends on where the mound starts, but, if we've got a 6-foot mound with 104 trees contiguous, you probably don't need a barrier there, but if it doesn't start back, we'll work with staff to see that the pond is protected.
And another question that came up, number of employees you're anticipating for the property?
I think, and you could tell me if your number's different, but we'll start with 5 full-time employees, which would be managers, leasing agents, and maintenance, service staff. The construction jobs go on before folks start living in part, when some folks are living there, but it's probably 180 what they call man-year jobs of construction. But in terms of permanent jobs, we'll have 5 full-time employees. The rest of the services are from local contractors that we hire to come in, and the guys that are already cutting the grass up the street to come down and cut our grass. The painters will come in to paint when somebody might move out of this place to repaint the unit. And the various things that, the carpet, if the carpet needs to be replaced after, 5 or 6 years, we'll have a carpet guy come in and put new carpet down. So the 5 full-time employees is what we anticipate, and the rest of the required services are from the local community service providers.
Did anybody else have anything on their list I might have missed?
I think there's a question about the park across, or the potential school
Yes.
across the street that's now just wooded area.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think if that was related to across Houck, I can't remember who, Stuart asked that one. So that area wasn't part of this PUD. It was its own development, the Laner Woods, now some Laner and some Heatherton, now changed names. But that, I wasn't here, but as I understand it, that was originally thought of as a park / school / open space / wooded preserve site. As it comes down through the years, it will be it is proposed to be at this point a wooded preserve where the woods are at. Boulder Drive would extend across the north, and then a city park behind. So not a school site is what the current proposal.
Okay.
It's been transferred into the city of Delaware's name.
From the original institutional designation?
The property is now in the city of Delaware's name. It's our holding now, as opposed to originally it was in the developer's name. But it's, the city owns it.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. I think we've made it through everything that we can comment on or ask at this point.
I would just like to ask my expert here to address the overall impact based on his experience and other developments of an additional 40 units, but a reduction overall in the site of the number.
Yeah, I think Jeff's getting at is the density issue. I think that's been some questions. And as I understand it, the site at 140 units was 8 units to the acre. I think increasing it to 180 takes it up to about 10 units to the acre. That is actually below most of the densities that we see in modern suburban developments in central Ohio. We see them closer to 12 to 16 units per acre. The trend, and I know this isn't necessarily applicable in this situation, but we're seeing increasing densities just because of the desire of tenants having a lot of amenities and not as much green space. We don't see it as much in these kinds of projects. So in response to who is going to respond to the project, a density is very acceptable to tenants, and the way it's laid out would be quite marketable to whom they're targeting. The other comment I heard tonight was regarding the market for these, and somebody made a comment about being a baby boomer that, and I think the Arthur Place project is a good illustration of this, is the demand for apartments among older adults, and whether you're 62 or 70 or even 80 years old, some of the other high-end retirement communities that exist in Delaware County, city of Delaware, you're paying $2,500, $3,000, $3,500 a month, whereas you can rent an apartment to get away from the maintenance of a house, cleaning out the gutters, cutting the grass, so forth and so on. And it is a viable alternative where we do see increasing shares of older adults wanting to rent. So it does provide an option that is not readily available in the city and would certainly complement some of the other housing alternatives here.
So is the impact of 140, I mean, that's the question that's before the commission tonight. 140 or 180? What's the impact of the additional 40 units?
Impact to what, I guess, Jeff?
To the density issue. You've heard, well, that's
from a tenant standpoint, it's irrelevant. It doesn't have any impact at all. And in fact, when you walk onto a site like this, I think any one of us could go onto a site like this and we couldn't tell what the density of that site is. So I don't think it's a valid argument to bring up that it's too dense of a site. It really isn't too dense of a site, and it meets the expectation of what tenants want.
And would the fact that there's a park right next door to this site have any ameliorating factors with respect to the green space?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When we look at sites like this, we also look at not only the project amenities, but the surrounding amenities and the kinds of things that tenants are looking for. And clearly, parkland is one of those things.
Do we have any questions for the applicant?
I've just one question, and it's to this point. We're hearing a lot of what you want to do to go up to 180, but we've also heard a lot from the community as to why they don't want to see 180. Are you willing to do anything to do more than 140 and less than 180? Are you willing to move some buildings around? Are there options on the table for that?
Yeah. We're here tonight to ask for a vote for 180 units. Which, again, there's a comment about, look at the density. We can't go, you heard Ms. Potts, we can't go any lower. So we reduce more density in the back and reduce that down to 90. I mean, that was our attempt to try to respond to some of the comments. Reduce the trips coming down Boulder Road, get Boulder Road built so that the other houses back there have a way out, and the contractors for them have a way out for the 85 houses that'll be on Boulder this year too.
Any other questions?
I think my comment stands on green space for these particular residences. a big concern for me is the amount of, what I can perceive as the lack of green space inside this area. And you just mentioned you wouldn't be amenable to changing or even eliminating Building 7 so you can actually get an access point to Boulder instead of DeGenova Way. Is that correct?
A number of questions there. Let me try to take
Well,
them one
there's
at a time.
certainly two comments in there as far as the green space and then particularly Building 7 so that we can get an access point instead of on DeGenova to Boulder.
So let's start with what I think is the easier one and ask how many residents or how many people here today would prefer we have an access point on Boulder Drive? Raise your hand. Like Mr. Weber said, I think the best way is to have the traffic not on Boulder, but going out directly to Houck. Regarding elimination or reduction of the units beyond what staff has recommended, what we're presenting out of need, not just our need. And maybe you'd like to know more. At council, they asked me to determine or to give my recommendation on how many multifamily units you guys have a deficit here in the city, how severe your deficiency is of multifamily housing. I gave my answer that, I thought it was as many as 1,000. Maybe Mr. Vogt, if that's important to you, can give you a little more insight on how severe the city deficit exists today of multifamily housing.
Well, there's clearly a need, and this is going to address just a small portion of that need. And I think that if you continue to lack housing choices for multifamily in this case, that you have the potential to not be attractive to employers who want a variety of housing options for their employees. I have seen that. In fact, we're actually underway for a study for the BIA right now to address that exact issue. And so that's why it's so important to be able to offer a variety of housing choices, including this one. The second thing about green spaces, and I just want to differ with you, Mr. Prawl, that it's amazing to me how the preferences are changing. Green space is not as important to residents, and I think we have to think about what the residents want versus what we think would be best for them. And in this case, I really do believe it has an adequate amount of green space and amenities to serve what their interests are.
The only thing I'd like to add is that, if we have the shortage of apartments, if we stay with the original, we actually add more apartments to the city of Delaware. If we go with a new development, we're going to lose X amount of apartments to the city of Delaware. So I'm just going by what you said. We have this need, and yet we're going to take away from the need.
We have Mr. Halder. I'm not here to argue with you, it's just to disagree again with you. We have 4 multifamily sites in this 282 unit planned community. 2 of the other ones are completed. They're not apartments. You heard me testify earlier tonight that I believe because of the location of the other site, it's more suited for sale attached housing, like the current one being built west of Houck Road. So out of the 4 multifamily sites, like we kind of contemplated 20 years ago, only one of them in this 280 development is an apartment community, this one.
Oh, okay.
And just as one follow-up to that, I think, again, we've talked a little bit about reducing the amenities. I really do believe it's important to offer a high-end option in Delaware. Again, if you begin to cut it back and you have fewer amenities, the rents are a little bit lower. It doesn't address in my opinion, where the market is headed towards, and the market wants to see higher end apartments. They're willing to pay higher rents, and they want the amenities to go with those apartments.
So many times when you see the higher end apartments, like I think of Columbus, downtown Columbus, where you can walk to everything. You don't have this on Houck Road. That concerns me a little bit. My other concern is number 7 building is 100 feet away from those other 2 properties. If we could do something, I know you've moved to 7 feet. If you could lose that building, I just think it would help the whole neighborhood. I'm sorry. Number 7 building's right there by, somebody pointed out.
Harmony, yeah.
I think
Yeah, that's right.
I just look at those 2 the houses there on each side of Harmony and how close they are. I don't know.
I mean, it's, I don't know exactly how close it is to how somebody said earlier, they believed from the earlier plan it was 110 or 115 feet. It's however much further away, in part, it's not directly parallel to those homes. But it is not as tall than the mound that's there today that is 40 feet from their houses, and it'll be buffered with 100 and some trees.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to bring this back to the commission and ask the commission what their wish is.
Look at me. Well, I guess to get it on the table, I'll make a motion to approve issue 2018-0026 zoning text amendment as revised with the 3 conditions.
Motion by Mr. Badger,
Second.
second by Mr. Prohl.
Mr. Badger?
I heard you. Yes.
Mr. Halter?
No.
Mr. Prohl?
No.
Mr. Volnick?
No.
Mayor Riggle? No. Vice Chairman Mansoris?
No.
Chairman Simpson?
No.
I'm not sure what to do with that because the first one didn't go. We still do it as it is, or?
Still should vote on it. I mean, I don't cover it very often. Which one did we vote on? The plan or the rezoning?
Text amendment.
The text amendment?
Correct. So now it's a development plan. I think it's cleaner if you just go ahead and vote on it. You
Yeah.
could also take the option of voting on it with a maximum of 140 units or whatever unit count you might see fit. You mentioned building 7, I think, has 16 units in it, so that would be 164
Yeah.
if you eliminated it, right? Check me, I'm getting tired.
That's correct, 160 right now.
But if they were going to do that, they should have amended the zoning
Yeah,
text amendment.
correct,
So at this
yes.
point, you
Could
have
be,
to,
could be no more than 140 then, I guess.
yeah, so you'd have
If you
to,
want to prove that.
you could approve it at 140, or you could say, I'm
Sorry.
just going to vote. Yeah.
Or if you want to do that, I guess you could reconsider the zoning text amendment too. That could be an option.
Yes. And if you were to do that, technically, the person asked for a reconsideration would be someone who voted against it because they were on the prevailing side and they can make a motion to reconsider if they wanted to put it back on the table.
So the people that voted no would have.
People that voted no could say, I would like to make a motion to reconsider. I was on the prevailing side and I want to bring it back on there. I don't come to these meetings very often, but this is kind of fun. So we've kind of stumped you. I'll lay out all the options. You can vote.
Yes.
We voted no on the zone change as it was. So you can vote probably no on the development plan because it can't fit the 140. You could find a way to say you're approved to do it up to the 140, or you could reconsider the vote no on the zone change if you wanted to come up with a different number, and that would have to be made by somebody who voted no last time.
Understand. I would take the vote on 2018-0027 without making any changes that the 26 would be.
Motion by Mr. Prohl.
No, I said
that's
I
not a
would.
motion?
Yeah, I would just say I'm not amending 26.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve 2018-0027 with all staff recommendations.
Motion by Mr. Prohl.
Second.
Second by Mr. Monsouras.
Mr. Badger?
No.
Mr. Halter?
No.
Mr. Prohl?
No.
Mr. Volnick?
No.
Mayor Riggle?
No.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
No.
Chairman Simpson?
No. Okay, moving on to the next item under our regular business. Item B, the AEP Service Center. Could the clerk, could you please read that in the record once everybody clears out?
Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
Item B, AEP Service Center, Case 1, 2018-0642. A request by AEP for approval of a conditional use permit for a new service center building on approximately 50 acres located on the south side of Slack Road and just west of the railroad tracks on property zone A1 Agricultural District. Case 2, 2018-0643, a request by AEP for approval of a combined preliminary and final development plan for a new service center building on approximately 50 acres located on the south side of Slack Road and just west of the railroad tracks on property zoned A1 Agricultural District.
At this one, Stacy. The subject site, located on the south side of Slack Road, is actually just west of their existing substation that's located east of the tracks on the Liberty Road. The approximately 50-acre site in orange, the area that they're going to be impacting is the northern portion where it's fairly vacant, and the southwest portion of the area. Most of the tree area is going to remain on this 50-acre site. They're proposing about a 50,000 square foot building, the office, garage footprint. The proposal would is required because the AEP's additional service required in the area, and it also keep the use in the city, maintain the city tax base. This is the proposal. In yellow is the building itself. Just east of that's a garage and storage area. There would be two curb cuts from Slack Road that would extend into the 56 space parking lot and encircle the building and go into the laydown area that's located east of the building and along the railroad tracks in the south eastern quadrant of the site, as I mentioned earlier. This will require conditional use approval. This is considered a public utility service and would be, if it meets all the conditions, would be acceptable in the A1 zoning district that's currently on the site. From a pedestrian perspective, the adopted bicycle plan has a bike trail along Slack Road in this area. The city engineering division and the applicant are working on details of off-site improvements from Liberty Road to this site. That may be incorporated in in those improvements in that agreement, or if it's not, at a minimum, they'd have to put a sidewalk on the south side of Slack Road in that area. They are proposing a fence, 6-foot-high fence with barbed wire along the entirety of the site for safety reasons. Tree removal, because it's A1, tree removal is permitted on this site. As I indicated, the only areas that they're impacting the northern area and the southeastern portion, most of the trees will remain. And to the east on their substation site, there's about a 5.5-acre tree preserve area just located north of the subdivision that staff requests, and they agreed to make that a permanent tree preserve. So that will be a tree preserve in the future and a condition of this approval. Landscaping and screening. As I indicated, they're putting a fence along the entire site. You have street trees, the front yard trees, and the parking lot interior landscaping trees, which need approval. To the west, along the park area, driveway area, they're putting a row of arborvitae, which will be a continuous screen. And on the southeastern portion, adjacent to the subdivision, the fence in that area, staff has requested that they put a vertical slat fence in that area instead of the regular chain link fence. That way it will be a continuous screen adjacent to the subdivision. Currently, there's a railroad track and there's existing trees. That fence will just screen it even more than what it's screened today.
I think vertical slats being the hedgerow slats, not different than what we did with Howell Industrial Park. So it's not just slats in there. It looks like fake greenery. We obviously recognize their need for security at a power substation and not substation, but service facility such as.
Correct. From a lighting perspective, there would be 53 light poles throughout the site that would be maximum 25 foot tall. And also there'd be 22 wall packs on the proposed building, and I believe 4 on the garage site. And this is the elevation of the buildings. That'd be metal buildings, 25 foot tall. The front portion, which would be an office, they'd have limestone on to the front top of the door, limestone around each elevation. And there'd be 5 overhead doors on each on the east and west elevations of the site. Staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit with no conditions and the combined preliminary and final development plan with 16 conditions. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, just want to thank the AEP team for moving forward. They had choices where they could move this facility. It is currently within our city, and its jobs are currently within our city, in addition to the proximity to provide service to our community. There were a number of other communities that were not City of Delaware that they took a look at, obviously own this property, and it makes business sense for them, or they wouldn't be here before you tonight. But appreciate that they look to you and the City Council to keep their facility and jobs in the community. And also want to just say thank you for being acceptance of a 5-acre plus permanent tree preserve when you don't have to do that. That doesn't happen with every applicant and every application, and I think it's a good spot for it adjacent to the subdivision. So I appreciate that consideration from my perspective anyway.
Questions for staff?
I'm just wondering, is that I noticed that they execute an off-site improvement agreement to Slack Road from Liberty Road to that. But does the city own Liberty Slack Road? Is that city, or is that one of those down the middle?
No, it's city responsibility.
Well, my concern is that, first off, it's not very wide.
Right.
From their property on. Not that they should be responsible from that on, but it's not very wide. And the shoulders of it are always going bad just because of what it is. I mean, it's an old township road, okay? And we're just going to increase the traffic on that quite a bit. I don't have an easy answer for it,
No,
except
it's a great question that came up at the very first meeting, and not from us, from them.
they should be.
They have to get their trucks up and down there, and so the condition you see related to an off-site development agreement, the economic development director and city council, city manager are working through some incentive agreements. Part of that is this off-site infrastructure agreement, and so the long and short of it is, given this hour, that they would improve Slack Road from their entranceway east to Liberty Road, and including the approach up to the railroad tracks is quite steep right now, in addition to all the other things that you mentioned, so that it would kind of flatten that approach out as well. Is that a fair summary, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Does that answer the question?
Well, that answers the question up to their property.
Correct, but it doesn't go to the west.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that the city's gonna have to look at that. Because what concerns me is that, I don't know how many on this group can remember, when Overfields wanted to run dump trucks out to the quarry, and the city said, well, we can't do that because Pittsburgh Drive was never built for truck traffic.
Well,
you know, and you get to sit back and say, wait a minute, a road in an industrial park was not built to specifications for truck traffic?
It's a great question.
I think we need
to take a look at that in part with the overall economic development planning that's going on to the west of this site. This project doesn't answer that question, but it's definitely something that we know exists.
Condition of Slack is it's an F. It's a failed road. We have a complete lack of reliable funding for these types of improvements. And it's a challenge that the cities face. We don't, without additional funds for road resurfacing or reconstruction, we don't have a plan for Slack other than, hopefully Jeggs Boulevard will eventually intersect Slack and extend all the way to Sawmill Parkway, which tells us that we should be cautious about putting a tremendous amount of money in Slack west of that intersection, because there's very viable alternatives. If that road network is in place, you can access Sawmill Parkway or you can access 42 at Jeggs Boulevard. But there's still a gap that needs to be taken care of between the future intersection of Slack and Jeggs.
No, I understand it, and I understand there is a money shortage. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that if the city's going to, which I think this is a good plan, to prove this, then I think the city should take a real hard look and move that up on a priority. Because I used to travel that road, okay? 2 cars had a tough time. Some of their trucks are fairly good size. You know, a car and that truck down there the road may not be wide enough to actually walk through there with the car and truck. I just want to make sure the city's aware that when they do something like this, that there's a responsibility that we have as a city to do something about it.
Yeah, and I do think part of that offsite agreement, at least the discussions, has been that their traffic would go to Liberty until the time, presumably, when it's improved to Jeggs Boulevard extended and on the side.
No, my hat's off to them. I'm glad to see they're taking care of some of the road and some of the problems there. Thank you. We appreciate that. Wouldn't want to do some more, would you?
I'm always willing, Jim, we can talk offline though. I do have answers for you. Why not Slack Road? Why would we choose another street? And it goes back to the only funding we have now is grant funding for resurfacing. And those grants are tied to higher ADT streets. So even if we wanted to do Slack,
No, I understand.
it would score well in our grant submission. And
that's why we need to get the levy passed, to be quite honest with you. I think everybody's aware of that. So, I mean, I'm just you know, with growth comes development, with development comes roads, and that's just, I just hate to see it done afterwards. Reminds me of Columbus and Section Line Road, or not Section Line Road, but down there off Polaris.
Old State?
Old State. What a great idea. Build it up and then widen the road. It happens all over the place. That was my only concern. We're aware of it.
Lance, can you bring back up the one of the aerial photos out of the tree preservation? Down there in the corner coming off of Kensington, there's like a little access road to the railroad track type of thing. My only concern is the security part to their,
There's a gate there now.
is there a gate? I know there's not a gate on this
It's a
side.
farmer access.
Yeah.
So they can get to the field.
Right, to the back side.
That's my understanding.
There's a gate there.
I didn't think there's a gate on the Kensington
There is
side.
not, it's on their side.
It's on the other side? Okay. That was only my concern, is the security to that site through there.
Unless they're gonna have a fence.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? All right, I'll have the applicant come forward, just state your name and address for the record, and feel free to add anything to staff's presentation.
John Ortley with AECom in Columbus. I think David hit on about everything I was going to say, in that we looked at 5 or 6 different sites without the city, most of them Sunbury and in the county. So being close proximity to where they are now, they really wanted to stay close to Liberty. That's kind of the core of their service area. So this was a really good option to work out. And I don't know what other viability this site had. It's got overhead lines that cross it, transmission lines, agricultural use. There's a lot of things there. City pump station next door. So I think it's a big win for everybody getting this on this site. The traffic question, I think I can address that, and that most of that traffic is going to go to and will go to Liberty Road, north and south. It's really their main corridor now, so they're going to continue to use that when this is developed, and that will be widened from approximately 18 feet to 20 feet from Liberty to the west edge of the property line. See the tree preservation we addressed. I think that was about it. The fencing, I think one question that came up about the fencing along the full perimeter of the residential property. I think one question that we had back maybe on that back side to make sure that you wanted it the full length of
It's about 1,000.
the residential length. Okay.
Just adjacent to the residential.
Okay. And then the sidewalk and bike path thing is still hanging out there a little bit. Which way you want to go? Sounds like the sidewalk is the preferred method. And we're also installing a water line from Liberty to the Jegs connection, which is a 12-inch water line, 16. That's really a 50-50 split with the city, with the engineering being funded by the city, and the construction administration portion being funded by AEP. So there's a clean break kind of at bidding, and then AEP will fund the construction administration of that project.
I'm sorry, could you just state your address for the record?
John Ortley, 277 West Nationwide Boulevard, Columbus.
Thank you.
And do we know what's going to become of the current facility? Is it going to, you're moving all office to the new site, or there'll be some left?
My name is Joel Sigler. I'm a senior architect with AEP. I'm at 2835 Cannon Circle, Lewis Center, which, by the way, I travel Old State, so I'm familiar with your analogy there. Yeah, that facility is going to relocate to this facility. That property will be for sale to whoever we can find. Hopefully, it's someone can make good use of the site. There also will be additional employees that will be employed at this facility because we're moving because we're expanding services, and we need more staff to do that. Just one more side note about the large wooded area. Our foresters are of the opinion that that's a stagnant growth. There's no new growth in it, so we intend to keep that, but we will occasionally harvest some, so we get some life in that timber stand. And so our goal is to keep it, but we're going to try to improve it as well. So it's not just that preserve. We'll keep a large part of that. Potentially, maybe we'll look to do something with it later. But in the meantime, we want to keep a healthy timber stand there as well. Couple things there.
Any other questions for the applicant? You're okay with all the conditions? Okay.
I guess the limestone, I guess, my name is Andy Huber. I'm the architect of the building. Address 777 Anderson Park Court, Westerville, Ohio. Just look at it. I've really only been concerned kind of with the building itself, and I know there's a couple comments on here on the building. Limestone, for example, I guess just where can I get what this Delaware blue vein limestone is, and
We can help.
yeah, I guess that's right. I guess that's all I really know, because I don't think we currently have that specified on the project. So
It could be or equivalent means or cultured stone, like I
Okay.
said. So, and we have some sample boards just for cut and color. We stopped just putting a name in here because the suppliers change the name all the time from Lake Erie Shore to Delaware Blue Vein. So the name changes a lot, but we could show you the look and the cut.
Come on, tell them the truth. He's got to go to the quarry and get it himself.
Or you could use the real thing if you wanted to. You could do that.
Dig a hole.
That would be wonderful, but I imagine you'll use the culture.
I want to thank you guys for hanging in tonight. I know it was a long evening.
Entertaining.
Yes.
For you to
I'm
say.
glad.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steph.
No plans of putting any tall electrical things in there, no resin, no.
Well, actually, along the right side, there are transmission lines there.
No additional though?
Already, no, not at this point. This is a service center, the substation work, that's a different piece. So this is purely community service. They're gonna be out fixing what goes down, and
I like it.
I had someone stop the other day and they live off of York, and just because there's additional ones there, and just yelled at me for a fact, but anyway, just want to make sure this isn't happening
no,
anymore.
there's no changes to that I'm aware of.
How about the noise to the neighborhood?
I
mean,
I think you'll find that the service centers are largely vacant during the day. They're out doing work. So, you're going to have traffic in and out in the mornings and in the afternoons. But during the day, there's.
Yeah. My concern is if when the trucks come in, they start backing up.
No,
Not me, but I see the neighbors coming in sometimes saying, all we hear is this beep, 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 like you do at the car wash.
There will be some
Please
of
pull
that.
forward.
They'll back into the structure in the evening. That'll be the one time in the evening, they'll back in there when they come in for the day. The site's set up for kind of one-way traffic, so we minimize, the fuel island, all that, we move forward. So the only time they back up is at the end of the day when they're putting the truck away.
So this is day shift, there's no second or third shift or anything like that?
One shift. Or, well, in an outage, they'll be there potentially at any time, but typical operations.
Yeah, that's fine.
On the building and the structure is located on the northern part of the site, far away from the subdivision. There is a home to the immediate west of that, but it's several hundred feet away.
Right, I mean, just the circulation at the building's 100 feet, so. it's
There's a
100 feet
laydown
plus.
yard close to across the railroad tracks and after the fence.
Thanks for choosing Delaware too.
Yeah.
Staying here. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Okay. Guess there are no other questions. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Are there any members of the public here tonight who wish to speak on this particular case? Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, Tom Wolber, W-O-L-B-E-R, at 272 Hearthstone Drive. I'm not familiar with the plans yet, but I have a comment and a question. I happen to be a member of the City of Delaware Shade Tree Commission. And so I'd like to find out more, I'd like to get some clarification on what exactly that tree preservation plan entails. Is the mission of the Shade Tree Commission to maintain the tree canopy in the City of Delaware, and perhaps even to enhance it? Now, in recent years, we have had, several cases where developers come in and remove trees without replacing them, showing, I'm sorry, I'm stuttering a little bit here. But if you remove trees without replacing them, that results in a net reduction of the tree canopy. And we've had several cases, and the Shade Tree Commission is quite concerned about that, where developers come in and say, yes, we'll remove some trees, but we guarantee you, we promise you, we will not touch, 50%, 60%, 80% of the rest of the development. It is still a net reduction of the tree canopy of the city of Delaware. So I wanted to make the Planning Commission aware of this and also find out what the specific plans are for this proposed development. And you may or may not have an answer now. I will follow up with that through my channels and the Shade Tree Commission. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, do you have anything to add to anything previously discussed on tree preservation for this site? Okay. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak on this particular case? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. What is the wish of this body?
Make a motion, we approve 2018-0642, request by AEP for approval of conditional use permit.
Motion by Mr. Halter,
Second.
second by Mr. Volnick.
Point of order, is that with all staff recommendations? Oh, we don't
There's
have.
no staff
there's no
recommendations on that.
Sorry.
I had to check too, Dave.
Sorry.
Mr. Badger, is it okay? Are we good?
Yes, we're good.
Okay. Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prohl?
Yes.
Mr. Volnick?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes.
Chairman Simpson?
Yes.
Make a motion, we approve 2018-0643, request by the AEP for approval of a combined preliminary and final development plan for the new service center building on approximately 50 acres located on the south side of Slock Road and just west of the railroad tracks on the property zone A1 agriculture, along with all staff's conditions and recommendations.
Motion by Mr. Halter,
Second.
second by Mr. Volnick.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prohl?
Yes.
Mr. Volnick?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes.
Chairman Simpson?
Yes, motion carries. Good luck, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item C on regular business. Could the clerk please read that into the record?
Item C, 2018-0707. A request by Delaware Church of Christ and Christian Union for approval of a development plan exemption for a shelter house on approximately 2.62 acres zoned R3, one family residential district, and located at 162 Bell Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, gentlemen and ladies, thank you very much for hanging in there with us tonight. I'm sure Lance will give a very brief summary of this.
Yeah, this is the arrow of the site. It's zoned R3. It's got 11 properties, fronts of Bell Avenue. It's for the county honor, it's built 1960. The applicant's proposing to put a 1,800 square foot shelter rear the site. This is the existing site plan, and there's a shelter on the northern portion. It's 30 by 60, about 10 feet from the residence from the east and about 40 from the ones to the north. They got letters from both residents indicating that they're okay with the shelter being installed at that location. Here's the elevation of the shelter. Looks nice. It's open-ended on three sides. One side would be enclosed, a metal roof on it. Poles. Their intent in the future is possibly to enclose that in the future, and if they did that, they'd have to meet all the building code requirements and the like. They want electric in it initially, just where their fellowship can utilize the outside space that they don't have right now, or the sheltered space out the proposal. Staff recommends approval with one condition. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'm sorry.
Questions for staff on this particular case?
You want to make one up?
I'll make one up just for fun. For the proposed west elevation and the east elevation, what's the finished material on the roof eave? If that's better suited for the applicant, I have to bring it forward. Okay. Would the applicant please step forward to the podium and just state your name and your address for the record?
My name is Philip Tipton. I am an architect with McKnight Group at 3351 McDowell Road in Grove City, 43123. And this is Pastor Benner. He can help answer any questions. Right now, the proposed material on the eave ends east and west is vertical siding. We'd prefer it to be vertical metal siding if approved. The lower wainscot we had talked about different materials, but we're going with the blue limestone. Some of you may remember the church has been making improvements over the years. Starting in 2009, it was the front elevation of the church out on Bell Avenue was heavily overgrown and just dated, and they've updated. Originally, they were planning to do some brick out there and had been asked to switch to the blue limestone, which they did, and greatly freshened it up. And so we would plan to do the same thing here.
We can get you a sample board too.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Or just take a picture of the front of the church.
Right.
It looks nice.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? Okay. No. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Are there any members of the public here this evening who wish to comment on this particular case? All right. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. What is the wish of the commission?
I'll make a motion to approve 2018-0707 with staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Prohl, second by Mr. Badger.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prohl?
Yes.
Mr. Volnick?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansour?
Yes.
Chairman Simpson?
Yes, thank you very much for hanging in there with us.
Have a good evening.
Yes, you as well. Good luck. Moving on to item number 4, the planning director's report.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to start the comprehensive plan rewrite this evening, and so we have a full agenda. No pizza, especially for you. I have nothing this evening except to tell you that the call for steering committee members is going quite well. Some of you have formally applied. I appreciate that. I encourage every member of the planning commission to apply, frankly, perhaps with the exception of the mayor.
Is that the 7th? I'm sorry. That's the 7th. This is the last day. Okay.
The 7th is the deadline. It really is pretty easy to do online for those of you that have done it. There's a link straight off.
Unless you're blocked at work from doing it.
Oh, well, I can't help that part of it. We had, at last count, it's changing every day, I think we're up to about 50 applicants, which is great. Obviously, a group bigger than we can really use manageably for steering committee, but we will put all volunteers to work through the process. So we're excited. We're making another social media and publication push. There was an article in This Week, I believe, at least there was in my version of the Dispatch over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So we appreciate media outlets getting the word out as well, and all of you, I'm sure you've been talking to people. The consultant turned around in about less than an hour, a really quick Google map of at least the location that everybody put in when they applied, so that we can try to determine at least some geographic diversity. And so it looks like we could still use some more applicants from the near east side and the east side, and we've reached out fairly strategically in that regard when I'm not doing other things but during the course of this week. Most recently, I reached out to Pastor Donnie Akers, who I think would just be an awesome addition to the steering committee, just period, and some of our east side planning, and I think he is interested in doing that as well. So, but if you know individuals that you think might be good in that particular location, the core of the city is well covered geographically. The southeast has a number of applicants. The south and the west and northwest. Far north, we don't have as many residents, but I don't think we have anybody far north. But I think that's pretty much east, near east and east side. We could use a few more applicants.
So we're gonna limit to 20, is that what you're thinking, or 25?
I would really like to keep it to about 20, 25, but I think the most important thing to do is to make sure we have a workable size group in consultation with my staff and our consultants, the city manager, obviously, but also to ensure that the group is a size sufficient to account for our complex, diverse community. And we have that every bit as much as an urban core city does. So we need to make sure that we hit all those markers, I think. So I'm not, all is a heavy word, but, we're going to try to ensure the diversity on that commission and produce the best recommendation that we can as staff to you as council and the mayor. And obviously the city council will have the final determinations. That's all I have for tonight.
I'm just kidding.
Unless you want to start, we could start tonight if you're.
I'm pretty bribable. If there's cookies, I'm there. Commission member comments and discussion. We'll just start with you, Mr. Badger, and work all the way around.
I have nothing.
Nothing? Dean?
Two quick things. I won't be at the June 6th meeting. Remember that. And for those who haven't been down, that they have started moving a lot of dirt for the new fire station. So 304 is getting graded out.
And Chief Donahue said earlier today at the Civil Service Commission, they're hoping for November and hoping.
What?
Hoping for what?
Hoping for completion.
In November.
End of November.
Oh.
Hoping.
That doesn't sound hopeful.
One day at a time.
It's always one day at a time, construction. George?
Just one problem that I'm experiencing down on Cheshire and the railroad tracks east of your neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Probably within the last 30 days, there has been a train that's stopped right there at that intersection. For not just a few minutes, not just for a couple hours, but significant amount of time.
Over the road.
Oh, yeah, just
Oh, yeah.
blocking that intersection a lot. So you either have to travel south to cross at Peach Blow or go north and cross at Brown Miller. So I don't know what's going on. Why that is that it's becoming more and more
It's been
frequent.
happening a few times.
Yeah.
Is that Norfolk Southern or CSX, or they both have a line?
No, it depends which track.
Which
They
track?
come together there.
Oh, they come together at that point.
Well,
So-
It depends, and it's both
Don't come
usually.
together.
One of these guys-
Separated
Yeah, they are separated by,
Is it the first set? Is it, so there's two sets?
There's two sets of tracks.
Westernmost?
I think it would be a good idea, man, if you have, or engineering has contacts with both railroad companies, just to remind them that we have an emerging high school, an elementary
Yes.
school, a lot of traffic on both sides of the road, and blocking the tracks is just potentially a public safety issue.
Right.
If you have those contacts, I
We
don't.
do.
And perhaps there's some explanation.
There's also an advocacy group too that actually has better contacts. It's the same group that I believe sponsors the,
Quiet zones or whatever.
so we have a couple of avenues.
especially the overnight ones, because it'll be like an overnight, yeah.
We don't use it at night.
I experienced it this morning at about 7:30, and I got to the clubhouse, and I realized it's not going anywhere. And I can just imagine, buses, like you said, traveling across the tracks there. So
So of course the gates are down.
Yeah.
So, right? Gates are down.
yes, the gates are down.
Gates are down.
Lights flashing.
Yes. And the
Not that
train
it
is-
would matter a lot with the trade sitting right there.
Surprise.
But hey, if you're on this side, that roundabout really helps, because man, you get
Oh,
to
it
that,
does.
and everybody just zips
Keeps
right
going
around.
around. Yes.
It's
It's like a slingshot.
Never mind.
Legal U-turn.
That's right. Yeah, that's roundabout.
I have nothing. I would just like to thank this commission. I know you were sick about the one, but thank you all for hanging in there and voicing your opinions. I appreciate it.
I got nothing.
Just piggyback to the staff again, you guys, that's awesome work. To be able to have this all set up for us and we get to ask some questions, it's all your legwork that sets it up. So thanks again and again. Appreciate that, guys.
We really appreciate that.
Oh, I forgot to thank Darren for being.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
hey.
I was very impressed. I haven't come to enjoy your meetings before, but you did a very nice job. So thank you.
It was easy.
Yeah, okay.
As always, I just want to thank staff and our special guest tonight. It was a real good time. And I'll leave it at that. Our next regular meeting is June 6th. And we are adjourned at 10:04.